My ribs still throbbed where my stepmother had shoved me into the kitchen table. Yet here I was, freezing in the hospital parking lot after a 12-hour shift. She believed a few bruises would force me to sign over Grandpa's $1 million inheritance. She had no clue he had secretly changed his will months ago. As I read her text demanding I run errands, I realized the pawn she loved to abuse was actually the one holding checkmate. My name is Marissa Caldwell, and I am 34 years old, though tonight my bones feel closer to 80. I sat in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old sedan, the engine cold and silent, staring blankly through a windshield that was rapidly disappearing under a fresh layer of Colorado snow. The parking lot of Redwood Crest Medical Center was a ghost town, illuminated only by the sickly yellow buzz of sodium streetlights fighting a losing battle against the whiteout. I had just clocked out of a 12-hour shift in the ICU, a shift that had bled into 14 hours because of a pileup on the interstate, and the smell of industrial antiseptic and stale coffee seemed to be oozing out of my pores. I should have started the car. I should have turned the key, blasted the heat, and begun the treacherous drive to my apartment. But I could not make my hand move. My fingers, stiff and raw from washing them 100 times that day, remained gripped around the steering wheel. Not steering, just holding on. It was that specific kind of paralysis that comes not just from physical exhaustion, but from the dread of what awaits you once the work stops. Here, inside the freezing metal box of my car. I was just a tired nurse, out there, beyond the hospital grounds. I was the designated fixer for a family that looked at me and saw nothing but a beast of burden. The vibration of my phone against the center console was sudden and aggressive, shattering the silence. I knew who it was before the screen even lit up. It was never a friend asking how my day went, and it was certainly never a date. I looked down. The group chat named Caldwell Clan had jumped to the top of my notifications. The first message was from Loretta. Marissa, since you are getting off soon, swing by the pharmacy on 4th. They said the insurance authorization for your father is pending, but just pay the copay and bring it. Also, we need wine for tonight. Red, not the cheap stuff. Then, a follow-up from my father. Dennis, and check on Grandpa on your way. Loretta thinks he sounded wheezy on the phone earlier. We do not want to drive out in this snow if it is nothing. I let out a breath that fogged up the cold air inside the car. They did not want to drive out in the snow. Of course they did not. But it was perfectly fine for me. After standing on my feet since 6 in the morning dealing with trauma and death, to act as their delivery service and home health aide. I had moved back to Ridgeview 4 years ago. That was the number that always stuck in my throat. 4 years. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, a pit stop to lick my wounds after a divorce that had left me emotionally hollowed out and financially fragile. I had told myself I would stay for 6 months, just long enough to save up for a deposit on a place in Denver, or maybe even go travel nursing. But then Dad had his hip surgery. Then Loretta had her mysterious bouts of migraines that rendered her unable to drive, but perfectly capable of online shopping. Then Grandpa Everett started needing more help out at the farm. The temporary stop had calcified into a trap. I was the daughter who came back, the one who failed at marriage and returned to the fold. So my time and my energy were treated as communal property. Loretta was the architect of this dynamic. My mother had passed away when I was a teenager. A quiet and gentle woman who asked for little when I was away at college. Dad married Loretta. She was everything my mother was not. Loretta projected the image of a high society matriarch in a town that was mostly blue-collar. She always wore tailored coats and gold jewelry, her hair sprayed into an immovable helmet of blonde perfection. She spoke with the authority of a CEO. Yet I could not recall a single day she had actually worked a job in the last decade. To the outside world, Loretta was the devoted wife and stepmother who kept the Caldwell family running. Inside the house, she was a vacuum of resources. She lived entirely on the income from the small business my father had sold years ago, and more increasingly, on the generosity of my grandfather, Everett Kane. Or, when that was not enough, she leaned on credit cards that occasionally ended up on my kitchen counter with a sticky note saying, "Handle this for us, sweetie." We are a bit tight until the first. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the keypad. I wanted to type that I was tired. I wanted to say that the roads were dangerous and Grandpa Everett had a landline they could call if they were so worried. Instead, I typed, "On my way." It was muscle memory. It was the path of least resistance. It was the behavior of a woman who had been trained to believe that her value lay in her utility. As I scraped the ice off my windshield, fighting the biting wind, my mind drifted to the undercurrent that had been running through our family conversations lately. It was subtle at first, like the smell of ozone before a storm, but now it was unmistakable. It was about the money. Specifically, Grandpa Everett's money. The rumors in the family, whispered by aunts and cousins at Thanksgiving, suggested that the old man was sitting on a nest egg worth at least $1 million. Between the sprawling acreage of the farm that developers were drooling over, some ancient oil and gas stocks he had bought in the 70s, and his frugal savings, Everett Kane was a wealthy man on paper. Loretta treated that potential inheritance like a paycheck she had already earned. She talked about the farm not as Grandpa's home, but as our asset. She discussed the stocks as if they were already in her portfolio, and her son, Bryce, my stepbrother, was exactly the same. Bryce was 2 years younger than me, a man who bounced between entrepreneurial ventures that always required startup capital and never turned a profit. He drove a truck he could not afford and spoke about protecting the family legacy while doing absolutely nothing to maintain it. I finally got the car started, the heater sputtering to life with a smell of burning dust. As I merged onto the unplowed street, another message pinged in the group chat. It was Loretta again. "We need to make sure everyone is on their best behavior this weekend. Those who are grateful will be noted in Everett as paperwork. We have to ensure the legacy goes to the people who actually care." My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. That was her favorite weapon lately, the vague threat wrapped in a statement of virtue. Grateful. Noted in the paperwork. She meant the will. She was obsessed with it. She dropped hints constantly, little breadcrumbs designed to make us dance to her tune. If I complained about running an errand, she would sigh and say, "Well, I suppose stress makes people forget who supports them. I just hope your grandfather does not see it that way." The contrast between her fantasy and my reality was sharp enough to cut skin. While Loretta and Bryce planned how they would spend the money, vacations to Europe, a new house in the gated community on the hill, I was driving a car with a check engine light that I'd been ignoring for 3 months. I was still paying off student loans for a nursing degree that kept me on my feet for 12 hours a day. I lived in a drafty apartment above a bakery because the rent was cheap, and I picked up extra shifts just to cover the family emergencies that Loretta manufactured. I was the one who drove Grandpa to his cardiology appointments. I was the one who organized his pillbox every Sunday, because Loretta claimed the font on the bottles was too small for her to read. I was the one who sat with him when he woke up confused from a nap, grounding him back in the present. Yet, in the narrative, Loretta spun. I was the distant, moody stepdaughter who only showed up when summoned. She was the primary caregiver, because she managed the social calendar and hosted the dinners where she poured the wine and took the credit. I pulled up to the pharmacy, the snow crunching loudly under my tires. The wind whipped my face as I ran inside, the automatic doors sliding open to hit me with a blast of overheated air. The pharmacist, a kind woman named Sarah who had known me since high school, gave me a sympathetic look. "Rough night?" she asked as she scanned the bag. "The usual," I said, forcing a smile. 12 hours, plus the concierge service afterwards. "Your stepmom called 3 times about this." Sarah lowered her voice. She was very insistent that it had to be the brand name, not the generic. I told her the insurance copay jumps to $50 for the brand name, but she said money was no object. I stared at the register. Money is no object because she is not the one paying for it. I pulled out my debit card. $50, I said, the number feeling heavy. That was my grocery budget for the week. Just put it on here. "You are a saint." "Marissa," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I am not a saint." "Sarah," I replied. Taking the receipt, I am a doormat. There is a difference. Driving out to the farm took another 40 minutes. The roads were treacherous, slick with black ice hidden under the powder. The farm was situated 5 miles outside of town, a beautiful, rugged piece of land that Grandpa had bought 50 years ago. When I arrived, the main house was dark except for a single light in the living room. I let myself in with my key. The house smelled of old wood, lemon polish, and the faint, underlying scent of dust. "Grandpa?" I called out softly. "In here." "Risa." His voice came, rough and scratchy. He was sitting in his recliner, wrapped in a blanket that I recognized as one I had bought him last Christmas. The television was on, playing an old western with the volume turned low. Everett Kane was 82 years old, thin as a rail, but his eyes were still sharp, blue and piercing like a winter sky. "Loretta sent you?" he asked, not looking away from the screen. She was worried. I lied. I checked his breathing, placing a hand on his shoulder. It felt frail under the wool. "She said you sounded wheezy." He snorted, a sound that turned into a legitimate cough. "She wants to know if I am dead yet, or if she has to endure another Sunday dinner." "Don't say that," I chided gently, checking his pulse. "She worries." "She worries about the bank accounts," he muttered. He looked up at me then, and his expression softened. "You look like hell. Girl, they working you to the bone at that hospital?" "It is just a long shift. Grandpa, I am fine." "You are always fine," he said, his gaze lingering on my face. "You do too much. For them. For me." "It is not a problem," I said, moving to the kitchen to check his fridge. It was stocked, mostly with leftovers Loretta had sent over. Rich, heavy foods that were terrible for his heart. I made a mental note to bring him some fresh vegetables and lean soup tomorrow. "Marisa?" he called out. I leaned back into the doorway. "Yeah?" "Watch yourself around them," he said. The playfulness was gone from his voice. "The wolves smell blood. They think the kill is close." A shiver went down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty house. "What do you mean?" "Just watch yourself," he repeated, turning back to the television. "And get home. You are too tired to be driving in this mess." I left the medication on the table and drove the rest of the way to my father's house to drop off the wine. I did not go in. I left the expensive Cabernet in the mailbox and texted the group chat. "Done, going home." I did not wait for a thank you. I knew better. When I finally parked in front of my apartment building, my body felt like it was vibrating. I turned off the engine, plunging the car into silence again. The snow was falling harder now, burying the world in white. My phone buzzed one last time. It was Loretta. "Dinner at the farm this Sunday. Mandatory attendance. We are having a family meeting. We need to talk about the future and the legacy of Everett Kane. We need to get everything in writing while there is still time." I stared at the words, the blue light of the screen illuminating the steam of my breath. Get everything in writing, while there is still time. It was not an invitation. It was a summons to a carving. My chest tightened, a physical sensation of pressure that felt like a hand squeezing my heart. I looked up at the dark windows of my apartment, then back at the phone, for 4 years. I had been the invisible backbone of this family. I had held them up, patched them together, and cleaned up their messes. But reading that text, hearing the echo of Grandpa's warning about wolves, I realized something shift inside me. They did not see a family member coming to dinner. They saw a competitor coming to the negotiation table, and they were bringing knives. I sat there for another minute, the cold seeping into my boots, watching the snow bury the hood of my car. A strange, dark intuition settled over me, heavier than the storm outside. The weekend wasn't just going to be a dinner. It was going to be an ambush. I just didn't know yet that I was the target. The drive to Grandpa Everett's farmhouse outside of Briar Hollow always felt like traveling back in time, but not in the nostalgic, warm way people wrote about in country songs. It felt like driving into a fortress where the rules of the modern world, logic, fairness, and accountability, dissolved into the thick, pine-scented air. The house itself was a sprawling structure of dark cedar and stone, built by my great-grandfather and maintained, at least superficially, by the iron grip of my stepmother. Loretta liked to call her residency there a sacrifice. She constantly reminded anyone within earshot that she had given up her vibrant social life in town to manage the estate for the family good. In reality, living at the farm gave her rent-free access to a 4,000-square-foot home and the ability to play the role of the landed gentry without ever having to do the actual work of land ownership. I arrived 2 hours early, as commanded, to cook the dinner that Loretta would later claim credit for. The kitchen was a masterclass in rustic luxury. Copper pots hanging from the ceiling, a butcher block island that cost more than my car, and a sub-zero fridge stocked with organic produce that I knew Grandpa never ate. By the time the sun began to dip behind the Rockies, casting long, skeletal shadows across the snow, I had roasted a prime rib, mashed 10 pounds of potatoes, and glazed carrots with honey and thyme. My feet were throbbing in my non-slip shoes, a dull ache that harmonized with the tension headache starting behind my eyes. Loretta swept into the kitchen just as I was pulling the roast out of the oven. She was wearing a cashmere sweater the color of heavy cream and gold earrings that caught the light. She looked immaculate, contrasting sharply with my grease-splattered scrubs that I had not had time to change out of before starting to cook. Perfect timing. "Marissa," she said, not looking at me but inspecting the crust on the meat. The caterer canceled at the last minute, so I told everyone I had my private chef handle it. It sounds better, don't you think? More exclusive. She laughed, a tinkling, hollow sound. I am joking, obviously. But really, don't make a big deal about doing the cooking when we sit down. It disrupts the flow of conversation if we are constantly thanking the help. I gripped the edge of the counter, the heat from the oven blasting my face. I am not the help. Loretta, I am his granddaughter. Of course you are. She breezed past me, grabbing a bottle of expensive Pinot Noir. But we all have our roles. Yours is service. It is what you are good at. The dining room was set like a stage for a Victorian melodrama. Tall tapers flickered in silver candlesticks, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The china was the good set, the one Grandpa's mother had brought over from Ireland, usually reserved for Christmas or funerals. Tonight, apparently, warranted the same gravity. My father, Dennis, was already seated. He looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders hunched as if he were perpetually expecting a blow. He gave me a tight, apologetic smile when I brought in the platter. But he did not speak. He was practicing his favorite survival strategy, invisibility. Bryce, on the other hand, took up enough space for 2 men. He sat at the right hand of the head of the table, leaning back with a glass of wine, looking for all the world like a bored prince waiting for his coronation. "This land is wasted on grazing," Bryce announced to the room as I took my seat. "I was looking at the zoning maps today. If we subdivided the south 40 acres, we could put in a luxury subdivision, mountain views, easy access to the highway. We are sitting on a gold mine while we play cowboy." "It is not a gold mine, Bryce. It is a home," I said quietly, unfolding my napkin. Bryce rolled his eyes, a gesture so juvenile it made my teeth clench. "That is small thinking. Marissa, that is why you are stuck changing bedpans and I'm looking at the big picture. Asset liquidation is the future." Before I could retort, the sound of a walker thumping against the hardwood floor silenced the room. Grandpa Everett appeared in the doorway. He looked frail, his cardigan hanging loosely on his frame, but his eyes swept the room with a clarity that made the hair on my arms stand up. Loretta immediately jumped up, rushing to his side to guide him to the chair she had not helped him into just moments before. "Here, Everett, let me help you. You know you shouldn't be walking this far without support." "I have walked this floor since before you were born." "Loretta," he grumbled, but he let her seat him. He looked across the table and winked at me. "There is the only person in this county who knows how to take a blood pressure reading without bruising my arm. Hello, Marissa?" "Hi. Grandpa." I smiled, the first genuine expression I had felt all day. "The food looks magnificent. Loretta, my father said, finally speaking up. You really outdid yourself. Loretta smiled, a beatific expression of false modesty. Oh, it was nothing. Dennis, I just wanted everything to be perfect for tonight, for the family. She did not look at me. I picked up my fork and stabbed a carrot. The dinner conversation started with the weather, but Loretta steered it toward money with the subtlety of a freight train. It began with a sigh, a long, dramatic exhalation that signaled she was about to burden us with her hardships. The property tax assessment came in yesterday, Loretta said, swirling her wine. It is criminal what the county is asking for, and with the cost of Everett's specialized care, the supplements, the therapy equipment, it is draining us dry. She looked pointedly at me. I don't expect everyone to understand. Those who live on a nurse's hourly wage simply cannot comprehend the sheer magnitude of these figures. It is a different world of finance. My face burned. I understand math, Loretta, and I know what insurance covers. Insurance, she scoffed, waving a manicured hand. Insurance covers the basics. We want the best for Everett, and the best costs money. Which brings me to why we are all here. The air in the room seemed to be sucked out. Even the candles seemed to flicker less. Loretta reached out and covered Bryce's hand with her own, squeezing it tightly. It was a gesture of solidarity, a visual cue that they were a unit. We need to be realistic about the future, Loretta continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Everett is not going to be with us forever, and when the time comes, there will be paperwork. There will be a distribution of assets. She paused, letting the words hang there. Assets meant the $1 million. It meant the land. It meant the freedom she had been salivating over for 20 years. Now, she said, locking eyes with my father, then me. We are a family, and families support the ones who sacrifice the most. When the will is read, whenever that tragic day comes, there will be beneficiaries, people who are noted in the paperwork because of blood or obligation. She took a sip of wine, her eyes hard over the rim of the glass. But there is also moral obligation, the idea of pooling resources. I think it is only fair that whoever is remembered in the will agrees, right now, to share a significant portion back to the person who has been here every day, the person who managed the house, the person who gave up her life. She meant herself. She was proposing a kickback scheme on my grandfather's deathbed. You want us to agree to give you money from our inheritance? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. I want you to agree to fairness, Loretta corrected sharply. Bryce understands. Bryce knows the value of management. Absolutely, Bryce chimed in, his mouth full of the roast I had cooked. Mom deserves to be compensated for her executive role in this family. I looked at my father. Dennis was staring intently at his mashed potatoes, as if they contained the secrets of the universe. He would not look at me. He would not look at Grandpa. Then I looked at Grandpa Everett. He was chewing slowly, his face unreadable. But for a second, just a fraction of a second, his eyes darted to me. It was a look of intense, almost desperate communication, but I could not decipher the code. Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind, sharp and cold. 2 years ago, the kitchen table at my dad's house, Loretta sliding a stack of papers toward me. Just standard insurance forms. Marissa, we need to update the beneficiary contacts for the life insurance policy so we can pay for your dad's surgery. Just sign here and here. I had been working a double shift. I was exhausted. I trusted my dad, who was sitting right there, nodding. I had signed 3 different documents without reading a single paragraph. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. What had I signed? It is about loyalty, Loretta was saying, her voice rising. It is about proving you are part of this team, unless, of course, someone thinks they deserve a windfall for doing nothing. I think we should discuss this later. Grandpa said. His voice was raspy but firm. I am still eating, and I am still alive. Loretta's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. Of course, Everett, we are just planning, for your peace of mind. After dinner, as I was clearing the plates, because the private chef apparently did not do cleanup, Loretta caught my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my skin through my scrub top. "Come outside for a second. Marisa," she said. It was not a request. We stepped out onto the back porch. The cold air hit me like a slap, freezing the sweat on my forehead. The snow was falling softly now, muffling the world, making our conversation feel dangerously intimate. Loretta lit a slim cigarette, the orange cherry glowing in the darkness. "You were quiet in there," she said, blowing smoke into the night. "I was listening," I replied, crossing my arms for warmth. "You need to understand how this works," she said, turning to face me. "When he dies, it is going to be messy. Probate is a nightmare, unless the family is united." She took a step closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the expensive wine and the stale smoke. "Here's the reality. Marisa, I have his ear. I am with him 24 hours a day. I decide who gets in to see him and who doesn't. I decide what he hears about his loving granddaughter." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, disbelief warring with anger. "I am educating you," she hissed. "If you play your cards right, if you agree to the arrangement I proposed, 50% of whatever you get comes back to the house fund. Then I will make sure you are not forgotten. I will make sure he remembers you fondly when he is reviewing the final drafts." "And if I don't?" Loretta smiled, and it was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. "Then you might find that the old man thinks you are too busy, too distant, or too ungrateful to deserve a dime. He is old, Marisa. He gets confused. He believes what the person closest to him tells him." I felt sick. She was openly admitting to manipulating a vulnerable old man. That is coercion. "Loretta, that is business," she snapped, flicking her cigarette into the snow. "Think about it. Half a loaf is better than starvation, and with your student loans, you cannot afford to be righteous." She turned and went back inside, leaving me shivering in the dark. I stood there for 5 minutes, letting the cold numb the fury in my veins. When I finally went back inside, the living room was empty. I made my way down the hall to the guest bathroom, but as I passed Grandpa's room, the door creaked open a crack. "Marisa?" I slipped inside. The room smelled of old paper and peppermint. Grandpa was sitting on the edge of his bed, still fully dressed. "I am leaving soon. Grandpa," I whispered, "I just wanted to check on you." He reached out and took my hand. His skin was like parchment paper, dry and cool. "Did she make you sign anything tonight?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I frowned. "No, not tonight. Why?" "What about before?" His eyes searched mine, urgent and fearful. "Any papers she said were for insurance or taxes?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "A couple of years ago, for Dad's surgery." "Why? Grandpa?" He closed his eyes, a look of pain crossing his face. "She has been trying to get power of attorney," he whispered. "She puts papers in front of me when I'm tired. She mixes them in with the medical forms." "Grandpa, did you sign anything?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. I don't think so. I try to read them, but my eyes..." Suddenly, the door swung open wide. Loretta stood there, her silhouette framed by the hall light. She looked from me to Grandpa, her eyes narrowing. "What is going on in here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "I was just saying goodbye," I said, dropping Grandpa's hand and stepping back. "He needs his rest," Loretta said, marching into the room and positioning herself between us like a shield. "You know, looking at screens or talking late raises his blood pressure. Please, Marisa, have some consideration for his health." She ushered me out, effectively blocking any further words from Grandpa. "Drive safe," she called out as I walked to the door, her tone dismissing me like a servant who had overstayed their welcome. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of white snow and red taillights. My mind was racing, putting together pieces of a puzzle I had been too tired to look at closely. Loretta had not worked in 15 years. Bryce had never held a job for longer than 6 months. My father's pension was modest at best. Yet Loretta drove a new SUV. She wore designer clothes. The kitchen remodel at the farm last year had cost $30,000. Where was the money coming from? She claimed she was using credit cards, but credit cards have limits. You have to pay the minimums. I had been paying for groceries and pharmacy runs, thinking I was helping them scrape by, but they were not scraping by. They were bleeding him dry. And the way she talked about the will, it wasn't hope, it was desperation. She needed that inheritance not to get rich, but to cover the tracks of what she had already spent. I pulled into my parking spot and killed the engine. The silence of the car felt heavy, suffocating. I pulled out my phone to check my bank balance. $412. That was what I had to last me 2 weeks until the next paycheck. A text message popped up on the screen. It was Loretta. Marisa, I forgot to mention, Grandpa needs a refill on his heart medication tomorrow. The Special One insurance doesn't cover fully. Can you transfer $300 to my account? I will pick it up in the morning so you don't have to drive out. I stared at the screen. $300. I thought about the pharmacist, Sarah. I thought about her telling me the copay was $50 for the brand name. I thought about the special supplements Loretta claimed insurance didn't cover. $300 for a $50 prescription. The math was simple. The remaining $250 wasn't for medicine. It was for Loretta. It was for her wine, for her manicures, for the illusion of the wealthy matriarch she played so well. My intuition, usually quieted by exhaustion and duty, screamed at me. It wasn't just financial abuse, it was theft. And by sending that money, by staying silent, by signing those papers years ago, I wasn't just a victim, I was an accessory. I did not reply to the text. For the first time in 4 years, I put the phone down, turned the screen face down on the passenger seat, and watched the snow bury the world, feeling the cold realization that the storm wasn't outside. It was inside my family, and it was about to destroy everything. The concept of elder financial abuse was not something that had ever actively crossed my mind. It sounded like a sterile legal term, something that happened in nursing homes run by strangers, not in farmhouse living rooms decorated with family photos. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon in bed 5 of the ICU. I was changing the IV bag for Mr. Henderson, a retired forensic accountant who had come in with a mild cardiac event. He was sharp, despite the wires and monitors. We were making small talk about his recovery when he suddenly gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Watch the money." "Nurse," he said, his voice raspy but urgent. "My son, he said he was managing my portfolio while I was sick. Turns out management meant buying himself a boat." I tried to reassure him, but he shook his head. "It starts small. $20 for gas, $50 for groceries. Then they realize you are not checking the statements. Then it is thousands. They rationalize it. They tell themselves it is their inheritance anyway. So they are just taking an advance." His words stuck in my head like a splinter for the rest of the shift. Just an advance. When I got home to my empty apartment that night, I did not turn on the TV. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. I filtered the search results for transfers to Loretta. I had always treated these requests as emergencies. A frantic text at 10 in the morning about a roof leak, a tearful call at night about a sudden tax assessment. I sent the money, felt good about helping, and moved on. But looking at them now, listed in black and white, the pattern was terrifying. January 4th, $300, Grandpa Meds. February 12th, $450, farm heating bill. March 2nd, $200, specialist copay. I scrolled back through 12 months of history. I pulled out a notebook and started doing the math, writing the numbers out by hand. When I totaled the column, my pen stopped moving. $9,420. In 1 year. I had transferred over $9,000 to my stepmother for the care of a man who, by all accounts, had a robust pension and a trust fund. I looked at my own savings account, which was currently sitting at less than $500. I was funding a household that had infinitely more resources than I did. The next day was my day off. I drove out to the farm, timing my arrival for when I knew Loretta had her standing appointment at the hair salon. I found Grandpa Everett in the sunroom, reading a newspaper with a magnifying glass. "Hey, Grandpa," I said, keeping my voice light. "I brought you some soup." He smiled, putting the glass down. "You are the only one who feeds me real food. Marissa, everything else comes out of a plastic box." I sat across from him. I needed to test the waters, but I felt sick doing it. "Loretta told me your blood pressure medication went up in price again. She said the insurance stopped covering the brand name." Grandpa frowned, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. "Expensive?" "I picked up the refill myself last week when Dennis drove me. The pharmacist said it was cheaper than last year. Something about a generic tier." My stomach dropped. "How much was it, Grandpa?" $12, he said clearly. $12 for a 90-day supply. I felt the blood drain from my face. Last week, Loretta had asked me for $200 for that prescription. She had pocketed $188 in a single transaction, and she had done it without blinking. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" Grandpa asked, watching me. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just confused about the insurance paperwork. You know how they are." "Speaking of paperwork," I added, seizing the opening, "Loretta mentioned the study was a mess with all the medical bills. Since I am here, why don't I organize them for you? File them by date so it is easier for her?" Grandpa waved a hand dismissively. "If you want to waste your day off sorting paper, be my guest. The filing cabinet is unlocked. Loretta never locks anything because she thinks she owns it all anyway." I walked into the study, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The room smelled of cedar and old tobacco. I went to the heavy oak desk and opened the bottom drawer. It was a chaotic mess of envelopes, receipts, and bank statements. Loretta was not organized. She was arrogant. She didn't hide things because she didn't think anyone would dare to look. I started sifting through the pile, my phone in my hand, camera app open. I found a credit card statement for a card I didn't know existed. It was under Grandpa's name, but the charges told a different story. Serenity Day Spa, $350. Lux Home Furnishings, $2,000. Ridgeview Aesthetics, $500. Loretta had categorized these in the checkbook ledger lying next to the statement, next to the spa charge. She had written physical therapy. Next to the furniture store, she had written medical equipment, hospital bed. I took photos of everything. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to brace my elbows against the desk to get a clear shot. This wasn't just padding the grocery bill. This was systematic fraud. She was disguising her lifestyle as his healthcare. Then I found the emails. Loretta had printed them out, probably to keep track of balances, not realizing she was creating a paper trail of her own crime. One email was from the bank regarding the Everett Kane Trust. It was a notification of a wire transfer. Recipient: Bryce Caldwell, savings. Amount: $2,500. Memo: student loan assistance. I stared at the paper. Bryce had bragged at Christmas, loudly, over brandy, that he had paid off his student loans 2 years ago with the profits from a lucky crypto investment. He had made a whole speech about being a self-made man. I kept digging. There were monthly transfers to Bryce, $1,000 here, $2,000 there. The memos were always noble. Car repair for farm errands, tuition reimbursement, business loan for property management. In total, Bryce had siphoned nearly $20,000 in the last 6 months alone. I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Loretta was home. I shoved the papers back into the drawer, exactly as I had found them, and scrambled to stand up. I was in the kitchen, frantically washing a mug. By the time Loretta walked in with fresh highlights and a shopping bag from a boutique downtown. "Oh, Marissa," she said, stopping in the doorway. She looked annoyed to see me. "I didn't know you were coming today." "Just dropping off soup," I said, drying my hands. I hoped she couldn't hear the tremor in my voice. "I was just leaving." "Well, don't rush off," she said, her tone shifting to that sugary fake warmth she used when she wanted something. "Since you are here, the water heater is acting up. The repairman said it is going to be $600. Your dad is tapped out until Friday. Do you think you could—" "I don't have it. Loretta?" I cut her off. It was the first time I had said no without an excuse. Her eyes narrowed instantly. You work overtime every week. What do you spend your money on? Certainly not clothes. Student loans, I said, grabbing my keys. And rent. I have to go. I walked out before she could guilt-trip me, but my blood was boiling. She had just spent hundreds at the salon, yet she wanted me to pay for a water heater that probably wasn't even broken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room with the lights off, my laptop glowing in the dark. I created a hidden folder on my hard drive. I named it Laundry. I uploaded the photos of the bank statements. I uploaded the pictures of the ledger where Botox became dental surgery. I uploaded the transfer confirmations to Bryce. But I needed more. I needed to know if she knew what she was doing, or if she had deluded herself into thinking this was normal. 2 days later, I got my answer. It was late, almost midnight. My phone buzzed with a notification from a Facebook group chat Loretta had added me to years ago. A group with her sisters and a few friends. She usually used it to share recipes or brag about Bryce. She must have hit the video call button by mistake, or maybe she thought she was calling just one friend and dialed the group. I accepted the call, muting my microphone and turning off my camera immediately. The screen was dark and blurry, tilted at an angle as if the phone was propped up against a wine bottle. Loretta was sitting on the patio of the farmhouse. I could see the string lights in the background. She was holding a glass of wine, her words slightly slurred. She was talking to a woman I didn't recognize, probably a neighbor. Worry about the remodel, Loretta was saying, laughing. The money is there. It is always there. But won't Everett notice? The other woman asked. Loretta waved her hand, nearly knocking over the phone. The old man? He thinks a gallon of milk still costs $1. As long as he has his pudding and his TV, he doesn't check the accounts. I tell him inflation is crazy, and he believes it. She leaned in closer to the other woman, her face illuminated by the patio heater. Listen, that cash is just sitting there, rotting. It is going to be ours eventually anyway. Bryce and I are just accessing our liquidity early. When he kicks the bucket, we will handle the rest. But as long as he is breathing, this house is an ATM. I hit the screen record button on my laptop, capturing the last 30 seconds of her speech. This house is an ATM. My hand covered my mouth. It wasn't just negligence. It wasn't just entitlement. It was malice. She was waiting for him to die. And while she waited, she was eating his legacy piece by piece. The next morning, I went to the pharmacy near the hospital. I needed one last confirmation. Sarah, I asked when the line died down, can you pull up Grandpa Everett's history? I just want to check the copays for the last year. Loretta keeps saying they fluctuate. Sarah tapped on her keyboard. Everett Kane. Let's see. Marissa. His copays have been 0 for most generics since January. He hit his deductible early. The most he has paid for anything was $15 for an antibiotic in March. And the heart meds? I asked. The brand name? We switched him to generic in February per the doctor's order. Sarah said. Loretta picked them up. She signed the waiver acknowledging the switch. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. She knew. She had signed the paper acknowledging the cheaper drug, and then she had texted me demanding $300 for the expensive one. She had looked at her phone, calculated how much she could squeeze out of me, and hit send. I took the printout Sarah gave me. During my lunch break, I found Jen, a nurse in pediatrics whose husband was a criminal defense attorney. We sat in the corner of the cafeteria, away from ears. Hypothetically, I said, pushing the stack of papers toward her, if someone were doing this to an 80-year-old relative, what is it? Jen looked through the photos on my phone and the printouts. Her expression went from curious to horrified. She stopped at the email showing the transfer to Bryce. Marisa, she said, her voice low and serious. This isn't a hypothetical. This is elder financial abuse. In Colorado. Depending on the amount. This is a felony. A serious one. Theft from an at-risk adult. How serious? I asked. Class 3 felony. If it is over $15,000, she said. From what you are showing me, they are well over that. This is prison time. Marissa, not a slap on the wrist. Prison. I stared at my cold coffee. Prison. If I reported this, I wasn't just starting a family argument, I was dropping a nuclear bomb. My father would be humiliated. Bryce would be ruined. Loretta would be let out in handcuffs. The scandal would tear through our small town. The guilt surged up, instant and suffocating. Could I do that to my dad? Could I be the reason he ended up alone? Maybe I could just talk to her, threaten her to stop. Maybe I could just cut off the money I was sending and let it be. But then, I thought about Grandpa. I thought about him sitting in that chair, thinking I was the one checking his blood pressure because I loved him, while Loretta checked his bank account because she loved his money. I thought about him asking if the pills were really $5 each, trusting the woman who was robbing him blind. He was vulnerable. He was the at-risk adult the law talked about, and I was the only one who knew. Silence was not neutrality. Silence was complicity. I went home that evening and made a pot of strong coffee. I sat at my kitchen table and opened the Colorado Revised Statutes online. I read the definition of fiduciary duty. I read about undue influence. I read about the mandatory reporting laws for medical professionals, which I was, technically, even if I wasn't his nurse on record. I had an ethical obligation. I realized then that Loretta wasn't just selfish or greedy. She was a predator. She had isolated her prey, confused him with lies about inflation and expenses, and was slowly bleeding him out. And she was using me to subsidize it. Every time I paid for the extra meds, I was freeing up more of Grandpa's money for her to steal. I opened the laundry folder. I organized the files by date. I wrote a summary document, detailing the conversations, the lies, the specific dates of the transfers versus the actual costs. I connected my printer. It whirred to life, a mechanical sound that felt like a weapon cocking. I printed everything, the bank statements, the emails, the pharmacy records, the transcript of the video call. I took a thick red cardboard file folder. On the tab, I wrote 2 words, Everett, important. I held the folder in my hands. It was heavy. It weighed more than just paper. It weighed the cost of my relationship with my father. It weighed the destruction of the fragile peace I had maintained for 4 years. But as I looked at the file, I remembered Grandpa's wink at dinner. The only person who knows how to take a blood pressure reading without bruising my arm. He deserved to be protected. I put the folder in my work bag, right next to my stethoscope. The time for keeping the peace was over. The time for keeping the receipts had begun. The snowfall that afternoon was deceptive. From the window of the nurse's station, it looked like a gentle dusting, a soft blanket covering the dirty slush of the parking lot. But by the time I turned onto the county road leading to the farm, the wind had picked up, transforming the flakes into stinging needles of ice. Loretta had called me at 2 in the afternoon. Her voice had been dipped in honey, a sweetness that coated the underlying demand. Marissa, darling, she had said, I know you are off shift at 4. Come by the farm. Just you. We need to have a quiet, woman-to-woman talk about Grandpa's care plan. I brewed that cinnamon tea you like. She never brewed tea. She drank wine or sparkling water. The offer of tea was a prop, a stage direction for a scene she had already blocked out in her head. I parked my sedan next to Loretta's pristine SUV. My father's truck was missing. He was in Denver for a suppliers conference, a trip Loretta had practically packed his bags for. Bryce's truck was also gone, likely out scouting investment properties, which was his code for driving around looking at land he could not afford. It was just the 3 of us, Loretta, me, and the man upstairs whose life savings were slowly bleeding into my stepmother's wardrobe. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat. Inside, tucked between my stethoscope and a spare pair of scrubs, was the red file folder labeled Everett. Important. It felt heavy against my hip, like I was carrying a loaded weapon. I had not planned to use it today, but the weight of it gave me a strange, terrifying confidence. The house was silent when I entered, not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a held breath. In the kitchen, Marissa, Loretta called out. I found her sitting at the large oak table. The room was dim, lit only by the under-cabinet lights and the gray winter light filtering through the window. She was wearing a silk blouse and dark slacks, her hair perfectly coiffed, looking like she was waiting for a photographer from Better Homes and Gardens. On the table, sitting squarely in front of the empty chair opposite her, was a thick document bound with a clip. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the chair. She did not smile. The honey was gone from her voice, replaced by the cool, efficient tone of a manager firing an employee. "Where is Grandpa?" I asked, remaining standing. "Resting," she said. "He had a restless morning. I gave him his sedative early." My hand tightened on the strap of my bag. "He does not take sedatives during the day. Loretta, it messes with his sleep cycle." "He does when he is agitated," she snapped, then smoothed her expression. "Sit, please. We have business to discuss." I sat. I did not take off my coat. Loretta placed a hand on the stack of papers. "Your father and I have been talking. We are worried about the tension in the family, the bickering over money. It is bad for Everett's heart. It is bad for everyone." "You mean the money you are spending?" I asked. She ignored me. "We decided that we need to clarify things, simplify them. This," she tapped the paper, "is a family unity agreement. It outlines the distribution of responsibilities and assets." She slid the document across the wood. It made a dry, rasping sound. "I drafted it with a legal consultant," she said. "It basically states that since you are an independent woman with a career, a noble career, you are financially self-sufficient. It confirms that you are not seeking any financial support from the Kane estate, now or in the future." I looked at the paper. The title was centered in bold font: Waiver of Inheritance and Beneficiary Rights. "You want me to sign a waiver?" I asked, my voice flat. "It is a gesture of good faith," Loretta said, leaning forward. Her eyes were hard, like flint. "It shows you are here for him, not for the payout. Bryce signed one similar to this yesterday." I doubted that. I doubted Bryce had signed anything that did not involve a check made out to him. I reached for the document. "I will take this home and read it." Loretta's hand shot out, slamming down on top of the paper. "No, this stays here. It is a private family draft. You read it now, you sign it now, then we can have tea." I pulled my hand back. "I'm not signing anything without a lawyer looking at it." "Loretta, I learned that lesson when you made me sign those insurance forms for Dad." "Do not bring up ancient history," she hissed. "This is about now. It is just a formality. Marisa, why are you being so difficult? Do you want to stress your father out when he gets home? Do you want him to know his daughter is grasping for money she did not earn?" I pulled the document out from under her hand before she could stop me. I flipped past the flowery introduction to the second page. The legalese was dense, but the intent was clear. "The undersigned hereby irrevocably waives all claims to the estate of Everett Kane, including real property, investment accounts, and personal effects. Agrees that all management of said assets shall be the sole purview of Loretta Caldwell. Relinquishes any right to contest future modifications to the last will and testament." It was not a peace treaty. It was an unconditional surrender. She was trying to strip me of my standing to sue before I even filed the lawsuit. I folded the paper and put it back on the table. "No." Loretta blinked. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated. "I am not signing this. In fact, I think Grandpa needs to see this. Does he know you are trying to cut his blood relatives out of his estate while he is sleeping in the next room?" Loretta stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You ungrateful little brat. We took you in when your marriage fell apart. We gave you a purpose. And now you think you are entitled to a piece of this pie? It is not a pie." "Loretta." I stood up too, my anger finally breaking through the exhaustion. "It is his life. It is the farm he built." "He does not know what he wants," she shouted. Her face was flushing a deep, ugly red. "He is senile. He thinks it is 1990. I am the one who deals with the doctors. I am the one who manages the bills." "You mean the bills you fabricate?" The words hung in the air between us, vibrating like a struck gong. Loretta froze. What did you say? I reached into my bag. My fingers brushed the cool cardboard of the red folder. I did not pull it out, but I locked eyes with her. I saw the bank statements. Loretta, I said, my voice shaking but loud. I saw the transfers to Bryce. I saw the spa treatments listed as physical therapy. I saw the $9,000 you took for medicine that insurance covered fully. Her mouth opened, then closed. For a second, I saw pure, unadulterated panic in her eyes. It was the look of a trapped animal. You have been snooping, she whispered. You violated our privacy. I protected my grandfather. I stepped back from the table. And I am not signing that waiver. I am taking all of this to a lawyer, a real one, not your legal consultant friend. You will do no such thing, she said. Her voice dropped to a guttural growl. You will not ruin this family. She moved fast, faster than I expected for a woman in heels. She lunged around the corner of the table. I tried to step back, but my boot caught on the leg of the chair. I stumbled. Loretta grabbed my upper arm. Her fingers dug into my bicep with shocking force, her nails biting through the fabric of my scrub top. Give me the bag, she screamed. Give me the file. Let go of me, I yelled, trying to wrench my arm free. She did not let go. Instead, she yanked me forward, using her body weight to swing me around. I lost my balance completely. She shoved me, a hard, two-handed push squarely in the chest. I flew backward. My right side collided with the edge of the butcher block island. The pain was instantaneous and blinding. It felt like a baseball bat had been swung into my ribcage. The air left my lungs in a sharp whoosh. I crumpled to the floor, gasping, black spots dancing in my vision. My bag slid across the linoleum, out of reach. Loretta stood over me, her chest heaving. She looked deranged. Her hair had come loose from its pins, and her eyes were wide and wild. You made me do that, she panted. You provoked me. I tried to inhale, but a sharp, stabbing pain in my side stopped me short. I curled into a ball, clutching my ribs. You hit me. I pushed you, she screamed. There is a difference. You were hysterical. She dove for the bag. She ripped it open and pulled out the red folder. She scrambled to her feet, clutching Everett, important to her chest like a shield. I am burning this, she spat, and you are going to get out of my house. Loretta. The voice was weak, but it cut through the chaos. We both froze. I looked up from the floor. Grandpa Everett was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. He was leaning heavily on his walker, his knuckles white. He was wearing his pajamas, his thin legs trembling. He must have dragged himself out of bed when the shouting started. Grandpa, I wheezed. Get away from her, Grandpa said to Loretta. His voice was shaking with rage. I heard you hit her. Everett, go back to bed, Loretta shouted. Turning on him, she was still holding the file. She is lying to you. She is trying to steal your money. She attacked me. Liar, Grandpa yelled. He tried to take a step forward, lifting the walker. It was too much for him. His foot caught on the threshold strip. The walker tipped. No, I screamed, trying to scramble up, but the pain in my ribs pinned me to the floor. Grandpa fell. He went down in slow motion, his frail body crumpling like a paper doll. He hit the hardwood floor with a sickening thud, his head bouncing once. Grandpa! The adrenaline overrode the pain. I crawled across the kitchen floor, dragging my body toward him. Loretta stood there, paralyzed, the red file still clutched in her hands. I reached him. He was conscious, but his eyes were dazed. A thin line of blood was already trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. Don't move. Grandpa, I said, my nurse training kicking in through the panic. Stay still. I looked up at Loretta. Call 911, now. She stared at me. She looked at the old man on the floor. She looked at the file in her hands. For 5 terrifying seconds, I thought she was going to let him die there rather than risk the police coming. Call them, I screamed, my voice cracking. Suddenly, the back door burst open. Is everyone all right? I heard screaming. It was Mrs. Ruth. the neighbor from the property next door. She was wearing a heavy coat and holding a casserole dish. She must have been walking up the drive when the shouting started. She stopped dead, staring at the scene, me on the floor in scrubs, clutching my side, Grandpa bleeding on the ground, Loretta standing over us like a statue with a red file folder. "Oh my God, Mrs. Ruth dropped the casserole. It shattered. I'm calling the police." Loretta snapped out of her trance. "No, Ruth, wait. It was an accident. Marissa slipped." But Mrs. Ruth was already backing out the door. Her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, emergency. I need an ambulance at the Kane farm. There has been a domestic dispute. People are hurt." The next 10 minutes were a blur of agony and noise. I focused entirely on Grandpa, checking his pupils, keeping his neck stable. He was murmuring my name, his hand gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Loretta paced the kitchen, muttering to herself. She shoved the red file into the junk drawer and slammed it shut. She smoothed her hair. She put on a fresh coat of lipstick. It was grotesque. When the sirens cut through the winter air, Loretta rushed to the door. I heard her talking to the paramedics as they entered. Her voice was high, breathless, the perfect pitch of a distressed caregiver. "Thank God you are here. It was terrible. My stepdaughter, she has been under so much stress at the hospital. She came over and just snapped. She started throwing things. She fell and hit the table. My father-in-law tried to help her and he fell too. I tried to stop her." 2 EMTs rushed into the kitchen. I knew one of them, Mark. We had worked a trauma code together last week. Mark looked at me, curled on the floor next to my grandfather. He saw the tears on my face. He saw the way I was guarding my ribs. "Marissa?" he asked, confused. "Check him first," I gritted out. "Head trauma, anticoagulants, possible hip fracture." "She is delirious," Loretta said, hovering over Mark's shoulder. "She was screaming about money. I think she is having a breakdown." Mark ignored her. He signaled his partner to take Grandpa. He knelt beside me. "Marissa, look at me. What happened?" I looked at Loretta. She was staring at me, her eyes promising retribution if I spoke. "My ribs," I whispered, "right side." "Did you fall?" Mark asked, his hands gently probing my side. I gasped as he touched the spot where the table had hit. The pain was white-hot. "No," I said. The word was soft, but it filled the room. "I didn't fall." Loretta gasped loudly. "Oh, sweetie, don't lie. We know you are embarrassed." Mark paused. He looked at the bruising already forming on my arm where Loretta had grabbed me. Finger marks, distinct and undeniable. Then he looked at the way I was holding myself. He looked up at Loretta. "Ma'am, please step back. I need you to give us room." "I am his power of attorney," Loretta shrilled. "And she is my patient right now," Mark said, his voice hard. "Step back." They loaded Grandpa onto a stretcher. He was groaning now, calling out for me. "I am coming, Grandpa," I said, letting Mark help me stand. The world tilted. My legs felt like jelly. Loretta tried to climb into the back of the ambulance with Grandpa. "Family only," she said, putting a foot on the bumper. "I am riding with him," I said, leaning against the ambulance door. "I am a nurse. I can monitor him." "You are injured," the medic said. "I will sit on the bench," I said. "Just get me away from her." The doors slammed shut, sealing Loretta out in the snow. Through the small window, I saw her standing in the driveway, the red lights of the ambulance washing over her face. She looked small, and for the first time, she looked afraid. Inside the ambulance, the heat was blasting. Grandpa was on oxygen, his eyes closed. I sat on the bench, holding an ice pack to my ribs, every bump in the road sending a jolt of fire through my torso. I looked at my grandfather's frail hand resting on the sheet. I looked at the bruise blooming on my own arm. Loretta had touched me. She had put her hands on me in violence. She had risked killing the man she claimed to care for, all to stop me from revealing the truth. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It wasn't a disagreement about money. It was a war. And she had just fired the first shot that drew blood. At the emergency room entrance of Redwood Crest, my workplace, my sanctuary, Dr. Evans met the ambulance. He was the trauma attending on duty. He took one look at me, holding my side, limping beside the stretcher. "Marisa?" He looked shocked. "What happened? Car accident? The roads are bad." He helped me onto a gurney in the hallway while the team wheeled Grandpa into Trauma 1. He lifted the hem of my scrub top to look at my side. I heard him suck in a breath. The bruise was already purple and ugly, spanning 3 ribs. "Jesus, Marisa." "Doctor," Evans said quietly, "this is blunt force. Did a patient do this?" I looked at the ceiling tiles. I counted the dots. 1, 2, 3. I thought about the waiver of inheritance. I thought about the $9,000. I thought about the way she had looked when she shoved me, not like a mother, but like a monster protecting its hoard. "No," I said. My voice was steady, not a patient. "Then who?" I looked Dr. Evans in the eye. "My stepmother," I said. "She did it for a will I have never even seen." The fluorescent lights of the radiology department hummed with a frequency that seemed to vibrate right against my cracked rib. I sat on the edge of the exam table, my shirt off, while a colleague I had known for 5 years gently taped my torso. She did not ask questions after the first time I told her I fell. She just looked at the hand-shaped bruise blooming on my bicep and the deep purple welt on my side, and she worked in silence. Once I was discharged, not as a nurse but as a patient, I did not go home. I could not go home. My apartment felt too far away, and the farm was now a crime scene. I took the elevator up to the 3rd floor, the cardiac wing, where they had admitted Grandpa Everett for observation. The charge nurse, a stern woman named Betty, who took no nonsense from anyone, met me at the station. "She is gone." "Marisa," Betty said before I could ask, "your stepmother was screaming about power of attorney and threatening to sue the hospital board. Security escorted her off the premises 10 minutes ago. I told them if she steps foot back on this floor tonight, they are to call the police." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you, Betty." "He is asking for you," she said, nodding toward room 304. "He has refused to take his sleeping pill until he sees you." The room was dim, lit only by the monitor's soft glow and the light from the hallway. Grandpa Everett looked small in the hospital bed, a tangle of wires and tubes making him look frailer than he ever appeared at the farmhouse kitchen table. But when I stepped inside, his head turned sharply. "Risa," he rasped. I pulled a chair close to the bed, moving stiffly to avoid twisting my torso. "I am here, Grandpa. I am okay." He reached out, his hand shaking, and took mine. His skin was dry and papery, but his grip was surprisingly firm. He pulled my hand up to his face and pressed it against his cheek, and I felt the wetness of tears. "I am so sorry," he whispered. His voice broke, a sound I had never heard from him in all my 34 years. "I am so sorry you had to take the blows for this house. I let it go on too long." "It is not your fault, Grandpa," I said, stroking his hair. She is just out of control." "She is not out of control," he said, his voice hardening. He pulled back to look me in the eye. "She is desperate. A rat bites when it is cornered. Marisa, and she has been cornered for 6 months. She just did not know it yet." I frowned. "Confused? 6 months? What do you mean?" Grandpa took a deep breath, steadying himself against the pillows. "Do you remember back in June, when I asked Dennis to drive me to the city for that dental appointment, and we were gone all day?" I nodded. "Loretta was furious because you missed lunch." "I didn't go to the dentist," Grandpa said. "I went to see Jonah Halprin. He is the son of the man who handled my father's estate. He is a shark, Marissa, but he is an honest shark." He squeezed my hand. I saw the charges. "Honey, I saw the Serenity Spa bill on the statement that came to the house before she could hide it. I saw the withdrawals. I played the fool because I needed time to figure out how to stop the bleeding without blowing up the family while I was still living under that roof." My heart began to pound. "You knew?" "I knew," he confirmed, "and I knew that if I confronted her, she would make my life hell. Or worse, she would cut me off from you. So I went to Jonah. We sat in his office for 4 hours. He paused, looking at the door to make sure we were truly alone. We changed everything. Marissa, everything. He let the words hang in the air. The will Loretta is fighting over? The one she thinks guarantees her the farm and the accounts? It is scrap paper. I revoked it that afternoon in June. "Grandpa," I whispered, stunned. "What did you do?" "I created a trust," he said, speaking with a clarity and precision that defied every rumor of senility Loretta had spread. "The Kane Legacy Trust. It is irrevocable. That means she cannot change it. She cannot touch it, and she cannot argue it in probate court, because the assets do not belong to me anymore. They belong to the trust." He watched my face, waiting for me to understand. "The liquid assets," he continued, "the stocks, the bonds, the savings, it comes to a little over $1 million. It is all in there. And the primary beneficiary of that trust is you." I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. "Me? Grandpa? I don't want your money. I just wanted you to be safe." "I know," he said softly. "That is why you get it. Because you were the only one who never asked for it. You were the only one who brought me soup instead of a bill." "But the farm," I stammered. "Loretta says the farm is hers. She says she has rights to it." Grandpa let out a dry, wheezing chuckle. "The farm was the tricky part. Loretta wants to sell it. Bryce wants to subdivide it into condos, over my dead body. The farm is going into a land conservancy," he said. "We filed the deed transfer 2 months ago. It will be protected land. No developers, no strip malls. It stays wild." He looked at me intently. "But there is a clause, a life estate clause. The land belongs to the conservancy. But the main house? You have the exclusive right to live in it for the rest of your life, rent-free, tax-free. It is your home, Marissa, not hers." I sat back, my head spinning. The sheer magnitude of what he was saying was impossible to process. For years, I had felt like a helpless observer, watching Loretta and Bryce circle him like vultures. I had felt weak. I had felt used. And all this time, he had been quietly, methodically building a fortress around me. "But how?" I asked. "Loretta watches you like a hawk. She reads everything. How did you get her to agree to any of this without her realizing?" Grandpa's eyes twinkled with a dark, mischievous light. "That was Jonah's idea. We told her we needed to update the insurance policies and restructure the assets to protect them from potential medical bankruptcy. You know how terrified she is of losing money to the hospital." He shook his head. "She drove me to the signing herself. She sat right there in the room. Jonah explained the trust to her. He used words like asset protection and managerial oversight. She heard what she wanted to hear. She thought protection meant protecting it for her. She signed the witness line. Marissa, she signed the very document that disinherited her." A chill went down my spine. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. "She has no idea?" I asked. "None," he said. "She thinks she is waiting for a payday. She doesn't know the check has already bounced." He shifted in the bed, grimacing slightly as his hip flared with pain. "But I didn't just change the will. I kept records, just like you did." He pointed to his bedside table, where his personal bag sat, a battered leather satchel that Loretta had tried to throw away a dozen times. "I have copies," he said. "Every time she made me sign a blank check, every time she brought home a receipt for something I never saw, I wrote it down, dates, times, what she said. I mailed them to Jonah every week. He has a file on her that is 3 inches thick." I felt tears running down my face now, hot and fast. I had been so scared. I had been documenting everything in secret, terrified that no one would believe me. And he had been doing the exact same thing, protecting me from the inside. Grandpa reached out and touched the bruise on my cheekbone, the spot where Loretta's ring had caught me when she slapped me. His fingers were trembling with rage. "She hit you," he said. The softness was gone from his voice. "She put her hands on you. That changes the game." "It was an accident," I said automatically. the old habit of smoothing things over kicking in. No, he cut me off. It was not an accident. She hit you because she saw the fire in your eyes and it terrified her. She knows. Marissa, deep down, she knows her time is up. And a person like Loretta will burn the house down before she lets someone else hold the keys. He squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. You cannot go back to that house while she is there. Not tonight. Not ever again as her stepdaughter. Where will I go? I asked, my voice small. You go to Jonah, he said. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. He is expecting you. He pulled a folded piece of paper from inside his pajama pocket. It was warm from his body heat. Call him, he said. He will explain the trust structure. He will help you get a restraining order if you need one. He will explain how to cut off the funds safely so she cannot claim abandonment. I took the paper. It felt heavy, heavier than the medical chart I carried all day. It felt like a weapon. Grandpa, I said, my voice trembling, if I do this, if I trigger this, she is going to destroy everything. She will drag your name through the mud. She will tell everyone you were incompetent. Let her try, he said, his jaw set. I have been evaluated by 3 different neurologists in the last 6 months. Jonah made sure of it. I am sound of mind. Marissa, and I am angry. He looked at me, his blue eyes clear and fierce, the eyes of the man who had built a farm out of rock and snow 50 years ago. You have spent 4 years thinking you were the servant in this story, he said. You thought you were the pawn she could sacrifice to get to the king. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, exhausted by the effort of the speech. But you were never the pawn, child, he whispered. In this game, you are the queen. I just had to wait until she moved her pieces out of position before I could bring you out from the back row. The metaphor hit me in the chest. The queen, the most powerful piece on the board, the protector. I stood up, clutching the paper with Jonah's number. My ribs screamed in protest, but for the first time in 4 years, the pain felt manageable. It was not the pain of submission anymore. It was the pain of battle. Get some sleep, Grandpa, I said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. I will handle it. I promise. I know you will, he murmured, his breathing already deepening as the adrenaline faded. Checkmate, Loretta. I walked out of the room and into the sterile hallway. The hospital was quiet, the night shift settling into its rhythm. A janitor was mopping the floor at the far end of the corridor, the rhythmic swish-swish the only sound. I looked down at the piece of paper in my hand. Jonah Halperin, 555-0199. It was just a number, but as I stood there, under the harsh fluorescent lights, I felt a shift in the tectonic plates of my life. Loretta was at home right now, probably tearing through my room, probably drinking a bottle of wine, plotting her next lie, convinced she had won the skirmish. She didn't know the war was already over. I walked toward the elevator, my limp pronounced but my head high. I wasn't Marissa the doormat anymore. I wasn't Marissa the source of free labor. I was the beneficiary of the Kane Legacy Trust. I was the keeper of the truth. And come tomorrow morning, I was going to be Loretta Caldwell's worst nightmare. Jonah Halperin's office was located on the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown. Sandwiched between an architect's studio and a quiet coffee shop, it was not the kind of mahogany-paneled, leather-scented den of intimidation that Loretta usually hired for her legal posturing. It was modern, sparse, and terrifyingly efficient. There were no stacks of disorganized paper here. Everything was digital, encrypted, and sterile. I sat across from Jonah at a glass desk. He was a man in his early 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of calm demeanor that usually masks a predatory intellect. He had a cup of black coffee in front of him and a single file folder, my file, open on his tablet. The trust is irrevocable. Marissa, Jonah said, leaning back in his chair. He spoke clearly, without the confusing jargon Loretta loved to throw around. Do you understand what that word means in a legal context? I shook my head slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at the tape on my ribs. I assume it means it cannot be changed. It means it is locked in an iron box and welded shut, Jonah corrected. Once your grandfather signed those papers 6 months ago and funded the Kane Legacy Trust, those assets cease to be his personal property. They belong to the trust entity now. You cannot sue a dead man for money he does not have, and Loretta cannot fight for an inheritance that does not legally exist in the probate estate. He tapped the screen of his tablet. The genius of Everett was his timing. He moved the liquid assets, the stocks, the bonds, the cash savings totaling just over $1 million before his health took this recent turn. If Loretta tries to claim he was incompetent, we have video evidence, 2 doctor evaluations from that same week, and a notary log proving he was sharp as a tack. She has no angle. I frowned, trying to reconcile this with Loretta's arrogance, but she was there. Grandpa said she drove him to the signing. Why does she think she won? Jonah allowed himself a very small, dry smile, because I never lied to her. I told her we were placing the assets into a trust to protect them from future liabilities and to ensure they were managed by the person Everett trusts most. Loretta heard what she wanted to hear. She assumed liabilities meant your father's bad spending habits or the hospital bills, and she assumed the person he trusts most was her. Narcissists do not hear the words you say, Marisa. They hear the reflection of their own ego. He slid a notepad across the desk toward me. It was a simple legal pad, yellow with blue lines. This is your homework, he said seriously. Loretta is going to figure this out eventually. When she does, she will not attack the law because she cannot win there. She will attack you. She will try to paint you as abusive, unstable, or manipulative. He pointed to the pad. I need you to start a log. Write down everything, the date and time she hit you, the names of the EMTs who treated you, every text message demanding money, every time she isolated Everett from you. This log is your shield. If we end up in front of a judge for a restraining order or a competency hearing, I do not want your memories. I want data. I took the pad. It felt like holding a weapon. For 4 years, I had been trying to forget the trauma to survive it. Now, Jonah was asking me to catalog it to win. Leaving his office, I felt a strange shift in my center of gravity. I drove straight to the rental agency on the north side of town. For the last 2 years, I had been renting a small duplex 3 streets away from my father and Loretta. It was convenient for them. Too convenient. They had a key. Loretta would let herself in to check on things and leave judgmental notes about my housekeeping. I walked into the leasing office and asked to see a 1-bedroom apartment in the Cedar Ridge complex. It was 15 minutes away, on the other side of the highway, populated mostly by young professionals and medical residents. It was anonymous. It was secure. I can take it today. I told the leasing agent after a 5-minute tour, I will pay the deposit and the first 2 months of rent right now. It drained a significant chunk of my emergency fund, but as I signed the lease, I felt lighter. I was buying distance. That night, I called Loretta. I kept my voice flat, stripped of emotion. I am moving, I said. There was a pause on the line. Moving? She asked, her tone sharp. Moving where? We need you close by. Your father is useless with the night meds. I am moving to Cedar Ridge. I lied smoothly. The hospital is putting me on more on-call shifts. I need to be within a 5-minute radius of the ER, or I lose my bonus eligibility, and I need the bonus to pay off my student loans. I heard the gears turning in her head. To Loretta, money was the only valid motivator. If I was working more, I was more exhausted, which meant I was more pliable, and if I was earning more, that was more potential cash for her to guilt out of me later. Fine, she sighed, as if granting me permission. Just do not expect Dennis to help you move. He has a bad back. I do not expect anything, Loretta, I said, and hung up before she could give me a chore list. The next morning at the hospital, I walked into the Human Resources Department. I had been dreading this meeting, terrified that bringing my personal drama into work would make me look unprofessional. But looking at the bruise on my side in the mirror that morning, a deep, ugly purple and yellow, had steeled my resolve. I sat down with Sarah, the HR director. I did not tell her about the $1 million. I did not tell her about the will or the trust. My stepmother assaulted me, I said quietly. There was a domestic dispute at my grandfather's home. I am currently safe, but she has a history of showing up here to demand things. Sarah's eyes went wide. She immediately pulled up my file. Do you have a police report? Not yet, I said, but I have medical documentation from the ER visit 2 nights ago. Dr. Evans treated me. I am flagging your file, Sarah said, her typing fast and aggressive. I am notifying security. If Loretta Caldwell steps onto this campus, she will be escorted off. She is not allowed near your unit. And Marissa? She stopped typing and looked at me with genuine kindness. If you need to change your shift patterns to avoid her knowing your schedule, say the word. Thank you. I said, I just might. Leaving HR, I felt a layer of shame peel away. I had stopped protecting her reputation. I had put it on the record. My next stop was Dr. Lawson's office. I had been seeing her sporadically for 6 months, mostly to deal with burnout, but today the session was different. I sat on her couch, wincing as I adjusted a pillow behind my sore ribs, and told her everything: the will, the deception, the shove in the kitchen. Dr. Lawson listened without interrupting, taking notes in her leather-bound journal. When I finished, she took off her glasses. Marissa, she said calmly, you are describing a classic triad. Loretta plays the queen to control the narrative. She plays the victim to avoid accountability, and she is the manipulator to secure resources. I just feel guilty, I admitted. Looking at my hands, I feel like I'm plotting against my own family. You are not plotting, Dr. Lawson corrected firm. You are strategizing. There is a difference. Plotting is offensive. Strategizing is defensive. You are building a wall, stone by stone, because they keep shooting arrows at you. She made me practice. We spent 20 minutes role-playing. Loretta asks you to pay the electric bill. Dr. Lawson said, what do you say? I say I cannot right now. I tried. No. Dr. Lawson shook her head. That invites negotiation. She will ask, when can you, or why not? Try again. No, I said, feeling the word taste strange in my mouth. I am not paying that. Better, Dr. Lawson said, again, louder. No, I said firmly. I cannot help with that. Good, she nodded. Memorize it. No is a complete sentence. By Friday, I had moved the bulk of my clothes to the new apartment. It was empty, echoing, and smelled of fresh paint. I sat on the floor of the living room with a pizza box, my laptop open. I logged into the website of a national bank, one that had no branches in Ridgeview. I opened a new checking account and a high-yield savings account. I initiated a transfer of every cent I had from my old local credit union, the one where Loretta knew the tellers and sometimes accidentally saw my balance over their shoulders. $4,000. It was not much, but it was mine. And now, it was invisible to her. Jonah had explained that when the trust activated upon Grandpa's death, the distributions would be direct deposits. Loretta would never see a check. She would never see a statement. The money would flow from the iron box directly to this secret account, bypassing her greedy hands entirely. My phone buzzed. It was Talia, my best friend from nursing school. She was the only person outside of the legal and medical circle I had told. I am at your old place, she texted. Your dad's truck is in the driveway. He is knocking on your door. My stomach dropped. I had not told Dad I was moving yet. I called him. Marissa? His voice sounded small, tinny through the speaker. I am at your place. It looks dark. Are you home? I am at the hospital. Dad, I lied. It was getting easier to lie to them. I picked up an extra shift. Oh. He sounded deflated. Loretta is, well, she is in a mood. She says you are avoiding us. She says you were disrespectful the other night. He paused, waiting for me to apologize, waiting for me to fix it. She shoved me into a table. Dad, I said, my voice cold. I have cracked ribs. I know, he stammered, rushing to smooth it over. She feels terrible about that. It was an accident. Marissa, she was just stressed about Grandpa. You know how she gets." "Yes," I said. "I know exactly how she gets." "Just come to dinner Sunday," he pleaded. "Don't make her sad. Honey, when she is upset, the whole house is miserable. Just make peace. For me?" There it was, the request that had ruled my life for a decade. Suffocate your own pain so I do not have to deal with my wife. I looked around my empty, quiet apartment. I looked at the logbook Jonah had given me, sitting on the floor. "I cannot make it Sunday," I said. "I have to work." "Marisa." "I have to go." "Dad, a patient is coding." I hung up. I stared at the phone. I realized with a jolt of clarity that my father was not a hostage. He was a collaborator. He had chosen his comfort over my safety 1,000 times. He was not going to save me. I took a deep breath and dialed Jonah's number. "It is done." I told his voicemail. I moved. The money is secure. The log is started. I lay back on the carpet, staring at the ceiling fans spinning lazily above me. I was alone. I was in pain. I was terrified of what would happen when the other shoe dropped. But for the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. Jonah had mentioned one last thing before I left his office. He had looked at my bruise and said, "In Colorado, assault on an at-risk adult or by a family member carries enhanced penalties. If she comes near you, if she threatens you again, we file for a temporary civil protection order. It is immediate." Protection. I whispered the word into the empty room. Protection. It sounded like a prayer. It sounded like a promise. Loretta thought she was playing a game of chess where she controlled both sides of the board. She thought she could move me, sacrifice me, and discard me at will. She did not know that I had walked off the board entirely. I was building my own kingdom now, with new walls and new rules, and she was not invited inside. I closed my eyes and finally, for the first time in a week, I slept without dreaming of snow. The silence from Loretta lasted exactly 3 weeks. It was a heavy, tactical silence, the kind that hangs in the air before a demolition crew detonates a building. When the text finally came, it did not appear in the group chat. It was a direct message to me, sent at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. "Family dinner tonight, 7 o'clock, at the townhouse. We need to discuss the long-term care plan for Everett. Please be prompt." The location shift was significant. The farm was Grandpa's territory, even if Loretta acted like she owned it. The townhouse in the city, however, was purely hers. It was a space of beige carpets, glass tables, and coaster rules that felt like martial law. By moving the venue, she was stripping me of the home field advantage. I called Dr. Lawson on my lunch break. I sat in my car, the engine idling to keep the heater running against the biting Colorado wind. "Do not go alone if you do not have to." "Doctor," Lawson advised, her voice calm over the speaker. "I have to," I said. "If I bring anyone, she will cancel. She wants to corner me. I need to know what her next move is so Jonah can counter it." "Then go with an exit strategy," Dr. Lawson said. "Do not drink alcohol. Do not sign anything. If you feel your heart rate spike, or if she blocks the door, you leave, immediately. And Marisa, check the recording laws again. Colorado is a one-party consent state." I recited the fact I had memorized. "As long as I am part of the conversation, I can record it without them knowing." "Then have your phone ready," she said, "and remember your line. No is a complete sentence." I arrived at the townhouse at 7 o'clock sharp. The driveway was full. My father's sedan was there, parked next to Bryce's truck. But there were 2 other cars I did not recognize. A modest sedan with a religious bumper sticker and a flashy, leased luxury coupe. This was not a dinner. It was a tribunal. I checked my phone one last time. I opened the voice memo app, hit record, and slid the phone into the front breast pocket of my blouse, ensuring the microphone was facing out. I took a deep breath, feeling the phantom ache in my healing ribs, and walked to the door. Loretta opened it before I could knock. She was wearing a high-necked black dress that made her look like a grieving widow, even though Grandpa was very much alive. "You are late," she said, though my watch said 7:01. "Come in. Everyone is waiting." The The dining room was set with the precision of a surgical tray. Sitting at the table were my father, who looked pale and refused to meet my eyes, and Bryce, who was scrolling on his phone with bored detachment. Next to Bryce sat Pastor Miller, the minister from the community church Loretta attended sporadically, and at the head of the table, next to Loretta's empty seat, sat a man in a shiny gray suit with teeth that looked too white to be real. "Marisa, you know Pastor Miller?" Loretta said, gesturing gracefully as if she were hosting a gala. "And this is Mr. Sterling. He is a financial strategist who has been kind enough to consult on our family's crisis." "Crisis?" I asked, remaining standing. "Sit down. Marisa," my father mumbled into his napkin. "Please." I took the seat closest to the door. "What crisis?" "Loretta? Grandpa is stable. I saw him yesterday." "Medical stability is not financial stability," Mr. Sterling said. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice used to sell timeshares to elderly tourists. "Mrs. Caldwell asked me to review the estate's exposure, with the rising cost of long-term care, the tax burden on the farm, and the liquidity issues. We are looking at a total collapse of assets within 2 years. If Everett lives that long, he will die destitute." It was a lie, a mathematical, calculated lie. I knew for a fact that the trust, the one they did not know existed, was generating enough interest to cover Grandpa's care twice over, but I kept my face blank. "So," Loretta interrupted, placing her hands flat on the table, "we have come up with a solution, a way to save the farm and ensure everyone is taken care of." She reached under the table and pulled out a thick document. It was bound in blue paper. She slid it across the polished mahogany toward me. "This is the Caldwell-Kane Family Asset Protection Agreement," she said. "It consolidates all the fragmented accounts, yours, Bryce's future interest, and the farm equity, into a single management fund. I will serve as the trustee to ensure bills are paid promptly without all this bureaucratic red tape." I looked at the document. I did not open it yet. "You want me to sign over my rights to an inheritance I have not even received yet?" "It is not about rights, child," Pastor Miller spoke up softly. He looked at me with genuine, misguided concern. "It is about stewardship. The Bible tells us to honor our father and mother. Loretta has carried the burden of this family for years. She is simply asking for the tools to protect you all." My stomach turned. She had weaponized God. She had brought a man of faith into her den of thieves to guilt me into submission. "Pastor," I said gently, "with all due respect, this is a legal matter, not a spiritual one." "It is a matter of trust," Loretta snapped, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "We are a family. We need to act like one. If we do not pool our resources, the state will take everything when Everett dies. Do you want that? Do you want the government to take the farm because you were too stubborn to cooperate?" "Read page 4, Bryce said, leaning forward. "It is a good deal. Marisa, seriously." I flipped to page 4. Under a section titled Voluntary Redistribution, there was a clause. "Upon the signing of this agreement, the trustee, Loretta Caldwell, agrees to dispense a one-time gift of $30,000 to Marisa Caldwell for the purpose of educational debt relief, contingent on the full waiver of future claims." I looked up at Bryce. He was smiling, a conspiratorial grin that made me want to vomit. "30,000, he said. "That wipes out a huge chunk of your loans, right? Mom is willing to front that cash now. You get paid today. You walk away clean. No waiting for the old man to kick the bucket." They were buying me out. They were offering me $30,000 of Grandpa's own money to steal $1 million from him. I looked at my father. "Dad, did you read this?" Dennis stared at his water glass. It seems like the safest path." "Marisa, Loretta knows business. She just wants to make sure there is no fighting later." "By taking everything now?" I asked. "By managing it," Loretta corrected loudly. "I am the only one who knows how to run that farm. I am the one who sacrifices my weekends. I am the one who deals with the diapers and the doctors." "You hired a night nurse 3 months ago," I said calmly, "and the farm manager handles the livestock." That is irrelevant. Loretta slammed her hand on the table. The silverware rattled. The point is, I am the matriarch of this family, and I am done begging for permission to save us. She pulled a pen from her pocket. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. She uncapped it and set it on top of the document. Sign it, she said. Sign it. Take the check for $30,000 and go back to your little apartment. Let the adults handle the legacy. Mr. Sterling nodded encouragingly. It really is the best option. Ms. Caldwell. If this goes to probate without this agreement, the legal fees alone will devour your share. I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen. I thought about the bruise on my ribs, which was throbbing in time with my heartbeat. I thought about Grandpa in the hospital bed, holding my hand, telling me I was the queen on his chessboard. If I signed this, even if it was legally void because of the trust, it would give her ammunition. She could use it to argue that I admitted she was the rightful manager. She could use it to harass me. But if I walked away without doing anything, she would just keep coming. I needed her to say it. I needed the recording to capture the truth behind the legalese. I picked up the pen. Loretta's shoulders relaxed. Bryce smirked. My father let out a long, shaky sigh of relief. They thought they had won. I turned to the signature page. I lowered the pen to the paper. But I did not sign my name. In clear, block letters, right in the margin of the document, I wrote, I refuse to sign any document that facilitates the theft of Everett Kane's assets. I demand a full audit of all accounts managed by Loretta Caldwell. I capped the pen. The click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I slid the paper back to Loretta. There, I said, that is my answer. Loretta smiled, a triumphant curling of her lips, and looked down at the page. The silence that followed was absolute. It lasted for 5 seconds. I watched her eyes scan the sentence. I watched the color drain from her face, leaving it a patchy, sickly gray, before a violent flush of red rose up her neck. You, she whispered. She looked up. The woman in the high-necked dress was gone. The predator was back. You little bitch, she screamed. She grabbed the paper and crumpled it in her fist, throwing it at me. It bounced harmlessly off my chest. Loretta! Pastor Miller stood up, shocked. Please. Shut up, she shrieked, spinning on him. You do not know what this girl is. She is a thief. She is trying to destroy me. She turned back to me, her eyes bulging. I offered you a way out. I offered you money. And you spit in my face? I am not the one stealing. Loretta, I said, my voice steady, making sure I spoke clearly into the microphone in my pocket. I know about the transfers to Bryce. I know about the credit cards. I know you want the land. Of course I want the land, she roared. She was not thinking anymore. She was venting 20 years of entitlement. I earned that land. I spent 20 years serving that miserable old man. I cooked his meals. I cleaned his house. It is mine. It belongs to Grandpa, I said. He is a corpse waiting to rot, Loretta screamed. He does not need $1 million. It is wasted on him. Nobody is going to steal my $1 million just because they share a bloodline. I am the one who was there. Mr. Sterling was gathering his briefcase, looking terrified. Mrs. Caldwell, I think I should go. Sit down, Loretta ordered, but he was already backing toward the door. You think you can stop me? Loretta lunged toward the end of the table, gripping the back of my father's chair. Dennis, tell her. Tell her who runs this family. My father looked up. He looked at his wife, her face twisted in ugly rage. Then he looked at me. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was terrified of her. He had been terrified of her for years. Marisa, he whispered, his voice trembling. Just apologize. Please, we can fix this. I looked at him, and I felt the last tether snap. The hope that my father would one day stand up and be my dad again, it died right there in that beige dining room. No, Dad, I said softly, we cannot fix this. You chose your side. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor. I am leaving. I announced, I will continue to visit Grandpa. I will continue to oversee his medical care, but I am done with these meetings. If you want to talk to me about money, you can talk to my lawyer." "You do not have a lawyer," Bryce scoffed, though he looked uncertain now. "You cannot afford one." "You would be surprised what I can afford," I said, locking eyes with him. Loretta rounded the table. She was vibrating with fury. "You are not walking out of here. You are going to sign a new copy. Right now." She reached for me. "Do not touch me," I said. I did not shout. I dropped my voice to a register I used for violent patients in the ICU. "If you touch me again, Loretta, I will have the police here in 3 minutes, and this time, there are witnesses." I gestured to the pastor and the fleeing financial advisor. Loretta froze. Her hand hovered in the air, inches from my arm. She saw the phone in my pocket. She saw the red light of the recording app shining through the thin fabric. "You," she hissed, "you recorded this." "Every word," I said, "including the part where you said Grandpa was a corpse waiting to rot. I wonder what the probate judge will think of that statement." She went pale. I walked to the door. My legs were shaking, but I forced them to move rhythmically, steadily. "Get out," Loretta whispered. Then she screamed it. "Get out!" I opened the front door. The cold night air hit me like a blessing. "This isn't over," Loretta screamed from the hallway, following me to the threshold. "I will sue you. I will prove you are mentally unstable. I will tell the court you manipulated a senile old man. You will never see a dime." I walked down the driveway to my car. I did not look back. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I saw her standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light, looking like a dark, jagged tear in the fabric of the night. She was still screaming, but the glass of my car window reduced her to a silent, flailing mime. I drove 2 blocks before I pulled over. My hands were shaking so hard I could not grip the wheel. I stopped the car, pulled the phone from my pocket, and hit stop on the recording. File saved. I slumped back against the seat, gasping for air. The tears finally coming. They were not tears of sadness. They were the violent, shaking tears of an adrenaline crash. I had done it. I had walked into the lion's den, and I had walked out with its teeth. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Bryce. "You really messed up. Sis, she is tearing the house apart. She is calling her lawyer right now." I deleted the text. I did not care about her lawyer. I had Jonah. I had the trust. And now, I had her voice, clear as a bell, admitting that she viewed my grandfather not as a person, but as a $1 million paycheck she had already spent. The battle had started, yes, but Loretta did not realize she had just handed me the ammunition to end it. I put the car in drive and headed toward my new apartment, leaving the toxic glow of the townhouse in my rearview mirror. The weeks following the confrontation at the townhouse were a blur of hospice nurses, oxygen tanks, and the slow, heartbreaking rhythm of a life winding down. Grandpa Everett declined rapidly, as if the energy he had used to set his trap for Loretta had been the last great reserve of his strength. I moved back into the farmhouse guest room, not asking for permission this time. Loretta was barely there. She spent her days in town, meeting with bankers or consulting with specialists, which I knew was code for frantically trying to consolidate whatever liquid assets she could still touch before the freeze set in. When she was home, she treated me like a ghost, walking through rooms I occupied without acknowledging my presence. Her phone glued to her ear, her voice a low, angry hiss of instructions to Bryce. The end came on a Tuesday night in late March. The snow had finally begun to melt, leaving the fields muddy and raw. I had fallen asleep in the armchair next to Grandpa's hospital bed, which we had set up in the downstairs study to avoid the stairs. I woke up to the feeling of a hand on my arm. It was weak, barely the weight of a dried leaf. "Marisa," Grandpa whispered. His breathing was shallow, a rattling sound that every nurse knows means the transition has begun. I sat up, instantly awake, grabbing his hand. "I am here, Grandpa." He looked at me, his blue eyes cloudy but still possessing that spark of fierce intelligence. "Do not let them rewrite the story," he said. Each word cost him effort. You know the truth? Keep the book open. I will. I promised, fighting back the tears because he hated crying. I have the log. I have the files. I have everything. Good, he breathed out. Good girl, my queen. He closed his eyes then. I stayed awake for the next 3 hours, holding his hand as his breathing slowed, spaced out, and finally stopped. It was 4 a.m. when silence filled the room. There was no drama, no sudden movement, just peace. I sat there for a long time in the quiet house. I did not call Loretta immediately. I took 30 minutes just for me, to say goodbye to the man who had been my father figure more than my own dad ever was. Then, I picked up the phone and called the hospice nurse to pronounce the death. Only after she arrived did I walk upstairs and knock on Loretta's door. The grief that followed was swallowed almost instantly by the circus Loretta orchestrated. Grandpa had wanted a simple service, closed casket, graveside only, just family and a few old neighbors. Loretta turned it into a coronation for herself. She booked the largest chapel in Ridgeview. She ordered arrangements of white lilies that cost thousands of dollars, filling the sanctuary with a smell so cloying it made me nauseous. At the funeral, Loretta stood at the front of the receiving line, wearing a black designer dress that I knew for a fact cost $2,000 because I had seen the charge on the credit card statement I photographed. She played the role of the grieving widow to perfection, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, accepting condolences with a tragic grace. He was my rock. I heard her tell the mayor, I do not know how I will manage the estate without his wisdom, but I must be strong for the family. I stood in the back, near the door. My father stood next to me, looking gray and diminished. He cried real tears, but he also kept glancing nervously at Loretta, as if asking for permission to mourn. What I noticed most, however, was not the grief, but the panic. Whenever there was a lull in the handshake line, Loretta would lean in close to Bryce. They were not sharing memories. They were arguing. I saw Bryce shaking his head, his face flushed. I saw Loretta gripping his arm hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Their eyes were darting around the room, assessing the guests, calculating something. They looked like people who were waiting for a bomb to go off, or perhaps realizing that the bomb they had built was a dud. Jonah Halpern approached me after the service. He wore a simple dark suit and shook my hand firmly. I am sorry for your loss, Marissa, he said. He was a good man. He was the best, I said. I have sent the notifications, Jonah said, lowering his voice. The reading of the will is set for 10 days from now. At my office, I have included Loretta, your father, Bryce, and you. She is going to try something before then. I warned him. I can feel it. Let her try, Jonah said. The trust is sealed. But watch your back. He was right. Loretta did not wait 10 days. She did not even wait 3. 2 days after the funeral, I received a call from the Ridgeview Police Department. A Detective Miller asked me to come in for an interview regarding allegations concerning the estate of Everett Kane. I drove to the station with a calm that surprised me. 4 months ago, this would have terrified me, but I wasn't the same woman anymore. I walked in carrying my red file folder and the logbook Jonah had told me to keep. Detective Miller was a middle-aged man with tired eyes. He sat me down in a small interview room that smelled of stale coffee. Ms. Caldwell, he started, looking at a file on his desk. We received a formal complaint from Mrs. Loretta Caldwell. She alleges that in the months leading up to your grandfather's death, you used your medical background to exert undue influence over him. She claims you isolated him, administered medication that altered his mental state, and coerced him into making legal changes while he was incapacitated. It was a masterful lie. She was projecting her own crimes onto me. She also claims, the detective continued, that you were abusive, verbal, and emotional. I sat perfectly still. May I see the dates she alleges this abuse occurred? The detective looked surprised by my tone, mostly over the last 6 months. Specifically, she mentions an incident in the kitchen a few weeks ago where she claims you became violent. I opened my red folder. I pulled out the medical records from Dr. Evans at the ER. "Officer," I said, sliding the paper across the table. "On the date she claims I became violent, I was admitted to the emergency room at Redwood Crest Medical Center with 3 cracked ribs and blunt force trauma to my right side." He picked up the paper, his eyebrows shooting up. "And this," I said, pulling out another stack of papers, "are the competency evaluations performed by Dr. Aris and Dr. Liu, 2 independent neurologists, dating from 6 months ago and 3 months ago. They certify that Everett Kane was fully cognizant, oriented, and capable of making his own medical and legal decisions." I laid the logbook on the table, and this is a log of every time Loretta Caldwell asked me for money, every time she isolated him, and a transcript of a recording where she admitted she viewed his life as an obstacle to her inheritance. The detective looked from the papers to me. Then he looked closer at my face. The makeup I wore covered most of it, but under the harsh fluorescent lights, the faint yellow shadow of the bruise on my cheekbone was still visible. "Is that from the incident?" he asked, pointing to my cheek. "Yes," I said. "My stepmother hit me. Then she shoved me into a butcher block table. My grandfather tried to intervene and fell. That was the night the ambulance was called." He leaned back, letting out a long breath. "We have the EMT report from that night," he muttered. "Mrs. Caldwell stated you fell." "Loretta lies." I said simply, "I have the truth, and I have the records." The interview ended very differently than Loretta had intended. Instead of leaving in handcuffs or under suspicion, I left with the detective's card and an assurance that he would be looking very closely at the cross complaints. But Loretta fought on multiple fronts. If she could not jail me, she would destroy my reputation. By Sunday, the rumors at the First Methodist Church were spreading like wildfire. A cousin called me to say that Loretta was telling the prayer circle that I had abandoned the family and brainwashed Grandpa in his final days just to get money for drugs. She spun a tale of a prodigal stepdaughter who returned only to prey on the elderly. It hurt. To have people I had known since childhood look at me with suspicion was a deep, cutting pain. But Dr. Lawson's advice rang in my head. Do not engage with the drama. Engage with the facts. I did not post on social media. I did not scream at people in the grocery store. Instead, I wrote a letter. It was 1 page, calm, factual. I sent it to my aunts, my uncles, and the few family friends whose opinions actually mattered. "Dear family," it read, "I know there are stories circulating. I am writing only to say that Grandpa died peacefully, loved, and protected. The legal matters regarding his estate are being handled by his attorney, Jonah Halprin. According to Grandpa's explicit, documented wishes made while he was in full health, I ask only that you honor his memory by waiting for the truth to be read, rather than listening to speculation." It was dignified. It was the opposite of Loretta's hysteria. And then, an unexpected ally emerged. Mrs. Ruth, the neighbor who had called 911, caught me at the mailbox at my new apartment complex. I did not know how she found me, but she looked determined. "I heard what that woman is saying at church," Mrs. Ruth said, clutching her purse, "about you being the violent one." "It is okay, Mrs. Ruth," I said tiredly. "People will believe what they want." "Not on my watch," she said firmly. "I told the pastor yesterday. I told him I heard the screaming that night. And I told him the voice screaming threats was not yours. It was hers. And I told him I saw you on the floor holding that poor man's head while she stood there checking her lipstick." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. "You are a good girl." "Marisa," she said, patting my arm. "Everett told me. He told me over the fence last summer. He said, 'Ruth, that girl is the only honest soul in my house. Do not let her win.'" Loretta must have sensed the tide turning, or maybe the police detective had asked her some uncomfortable questions. 2 days before the will reading, my phone rang. It was Loretta. Her voice was unrecognizable, soft, purring, almost maternal. "Marisa, honey," she said, "I have been thinking. This whole police thing. It is just a misunderstanding. Grief makes us do crazy things, doesn't it? What do you want, Loretta? I asked, putting the call on speaker so I could record it. I want us to be a family, she said. Listen, I know you are worried about the money. Bryce and we have been talking. We are willing to increase the gift, $50,000, cash, as soon as the estate clears. You just need to withdraw your statement to the police and sign a little document saying you will not contest my executorship. She was trying to bribe me with $50,000 of money she did not even know she had lost yet. We can put this all behind us, she urged. You can pay off your loans, start fresh, no lawyers, no messy court dates, just family taking care of family. It was tempting, in a sick way, to just end the fighting, to take the check and run. But then I remembered Grandpa's voice. Don't let them rewrite the story. Loretta, I said, we are past deals. Don't be stupid. Her voice hardened instantly. If you go into that room on Thursday, you are going to lose. I have the original will. I have the house. You are going to walk away with nothing. Then let it happen, I said. We will let the lawyers handle it. You will regret this, she snapped. I will bury you in legal fees. See you Thursday, I said, and hung up. The morning of the will reading dawned cold and gray, a typical Colorado spring day where winter refuses to let go. I dressed carefully. I wore a navy blue suit I had bought for interviews, professional, sharp, armored. I put my hair up. I covered the fading bruise on my cheek with concealer. I arrived at Jonah's office 10 minutes early. Loretta arrived 5 minutes later. She made an entrance. She was wearing a black dress that looked suitable for a cocktail party, a fur stole draped over her shoulders, and large sunglasses. Bryce trailed behind her, looking hungover and nervous. My father walked beside them, looking at his shoes. Loretta saw me in the waiting room. She stopped, lowered her sunglasses, and gave me a look of pure pity. Last chance, Marissa, she whispered as she swept past me. Everything is about to go back to its rightful place. She looked so confident. She radiated the power of someone who believes the world operates according to her rules. She thought she was walking into a coronation. She had no idea she was walking into an execution. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I felt the ghost of Grandpa's hand in mine. After you, I said. We walked into the conference room. The table was long and polished. Jonah sat at the head, a stack of documents in front of him. He did not smile. Loretta took the seat to Jonah's right, the seat of honor. She placed her expensive handbag on the table and folded her hands. Let's get this over with, she said, checking her watch. I have a realtor coming to the farm at 2 o'clock to discuss the listing. Jonah looked up. His eyes were cold behind his glasses. You might want to cancel that appointment. Mrs. Caldwell, he said quietly. Loretta froze. Excuse me? Please. Jonah gestured to the chairs. Everyone sit down. The door clicked shut, sealing us in. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the static of the storm that was about to break. Loretta looked at Jonah, then at me, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine doubt crossed her face. But it was too late. The fuse was already lit. The hearing for the temporary civil protection order took place 3 days before the scheduled reading of the will. It was a procedural hurdle, a necessary stopgap to ensure my safety. But in the theater of Ridgeview legal drama, it became the opening act of the war. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. A windowless box with fluorescent lighting and industrial carpet that smelled of floor wax and anxiety. There was no jury, only Judge Halloway, a stern man with a reputation for hating wasted time. I sat next to Jonah at the plaintiff's table. My hands were folded in my lap to hide their trembling. Across the aisle, Loretta sat with her lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, not the financial advisor from the dinner, but a strip mall attorney known for aggressive divorce settlements. Loretta was dressed for the part of the grieving martyr. She wore a modest charcoal skirt suit, no jewelry, and had styled her hair in a severe, humble bun. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before the bailiff even called the court to order. When it was her turn to speak, her voice was a masterpiece of wavering sorrow. Your Honor, Loretta said, looking up at the judge with wide, watery eyes. "I never wanted to be here. I love my stepdaughter. But since her grandfather passed, she has been unmoored. She has been hysterical." She paused to sniffle. On the night in question, she came to the farm in a rage. She was screaming about money. I tried to calm her down. I reached out to hold her, to steady her, because I thought she might hurt herself. She stumbled into the table. I would never hurt her. I was trying to protect her from her own grief. It was a compelling narrative. If I did not know her, I might have believed it. She painted herself as the steady hand and me as the greedy, unstable child. "She is imagining things, Your Honor," Loretta continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She has created this villain out of me because she cannot process her loss. It is a tragedy, really." Her lawyer, Mr. Sterling, nodded solemnly. "We ask that this order be dismissed. Your Honor, Mrs. Caldwell is a grieving widow being harassed by a stepdaughter with a history of emotional instability." Judge Holloway turned his gaze to our table. "Mr. Halprin?" Jonah did not stand up to make a speech. He simply adjusted his glasses and tapped his tablet. "Your Honor," Jonah said, his voice dry and factual, "we are not here to debate the psychology of grief. We are here to address physical assault and credible threats of financial extortion." Jonah walked to the bench and handed the clerk a binder. "Exhibit A," Jonah said, "photographs taken by Dr. Evans at Redwood Crest Medical Center on the night of the incident. They show distinct bruising on Ms. Caldwell's upper arm, consistent with a grab mark, and severe bruising on her right rib cage." I watched the judge flip the page. He paused. The photos were graphic, the purple and black blooming against my pale skin. "Exhibit B," Jonah continued, "the medical report, diagnosis, blunt force trauma, 3 cracked ribs. The attending physician notes that the patient stated the injury was caused by a family member. This contradicts Mrs. Caldwell's claim of a stumble." Loretta shifted in her seat. Her tissue stopped moving. "And finally, Your Honor," Jonah said, "we have Exhibit C, an audio recording taken by my client during a meeting at Mrs. Caldwell's townhouse last week. We believe this speaks to the motive behind the intimidation." Loretta's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. We have not authenticated this recording. It was provided to opposing counsel 24 hours ago," Jonah said smoothly, "and Ms. Caldwell is prepared to swear to its authenticity." "Play it," Judge Holloway ordered. The room fell silent. Jonah pressed a button on his laptop, and the speakers on the judge's bench crackled to life. My voice filled the room, calm and steady. "I am not the one stealing. Loretta." Then, Loretta's voice. It was not the soft, wavering voice she had used 5 minutes ago. It was the shriek of a banshee. "Of course I want the land. I earned that land. I spent 20 years serving that miserable old man. It is mine." Loretta stiffened in her chair. Her face went pale, then patchy red. The recording continued. The judge listened, his face impassive, as the audio Loretta screamed, "He is a corpse waiting to rot. Nobody is going to steal my $1 million just because they share a bloodline." When the recording ended, the silence in the courtroom was heavier than before. It was the silence of a mask shattering. Loretta refused to look at the judge. She stared at the table, her hands clenching and unclenching. Jonah called Mrs. Ruth to the stand. The neighbor walked in, clutching her purse, looking nervous but determined. "Mrs. Ruth?" Jonah asked. "On the night the ambulance was called to the Kane farm, what did you hear?" "I heard screaming," Mrs. Ruth said, her voice clear. "Terrible screaming. I was in my garden. I ran over because I thought someone was being murdered." "And who was screaming?" "Loretta. Mrs. Ruth pointed a shaking finger at my stepmother. "She was yelling, 'Give it to me!' over and over, and then I heard a crash. When I got to the door, Marissa was on the floor holding her side, and Loretta was standing over her. She did not look sad. Your Honor, she looked like she wanted to hit her again." Loretta's lawyer tried to salvage the situation on cross-examination. He turned to me. Ms. Caldwell, he said, putting on a sympathetic face. Is it true you have been seeing a therapist, Dr. Lawson, for the past 6 months? Yes, I said. And is it true you discuss feelings of persecution and family conflict? Perhaps you feel victimized easily. He was trying to paint me as paranoid. Jonah stood up. We called Dr. Lawson to the stand. Dr. Lawson took the oath. She looked professional and unbothered by Mr. Sterling's aggressive posture. Dr. Lawson, Jonah asked, in your professional opinion, does Marissa Caldwell suffer from delusions or paranoia? No, Dr. Lawson said firmly. Marissa sought therapy to deal with the stress of a high-pressure job and a complex family dynamic involving a narcissist manipulator. Her perception of reality is acute. In fact, her ability to document facts despite emotional pressure is a sign of extreme mental resilience, not instability. Mr. Sterling sat down, defeated. Judge Holloway cleared his throat. He looked over his spectacles at Loretta. Mrs. Caldwell, the judge asked, I have a question. Loretta looked up, trying to summon her tears again, but they would not come. Yes, Your Honor? In the recording, the judge said, glancing at his notes, you referred to your late father-in-law as a corpse waiting to rot, and claimed ownership of his assets before his death. Did you ever express to the petitioner, or anyone else, that you felt entitled to his $1 million? Loretta froze. It was the trap question. If she said yes, she admitted the motive. If she said no, she committed perjury in the face of the recording. She stammered. She looked at her lawyer, but he was looking at his papers. Your Honor, everyone wants financial security. I sacrificed a lot. That is not an answer, the judge said sharply. He banged his gavel. I am granting the temporary protection order. Judge Holloway ruled, Mrs. Caldwell, you are to stay 500 feet away from Marissa Caldwell, her home, and her place of employment. You are to have no contact with her whatsoever, direct or indirect, except through legal counsel for the purposes of the estate probate. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do I make myself clear? But I need to talk to her about the funeral bills, Loretta blurted out. She has the checkbook. Through counsel, Mrs. Caldwell, the judge snapped. Court is adjourned. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like I was floating. My knees were weak, but my head was high. The system worked. For the first time in my life, the bully had been told no by someone she could not manipulate. But the drama was not over. In the lobby of the courthouse, the facade finally crumbled completely. Loretta, Dennis, and Bryce were waiting for the elevator. A small crowd of people, lawyers, clerks, other petitioners, were milling about. Loretta saw me exit the courtroom with Jonah. She snapped. She turned on Bryce, who was looking at his phone. She grabbed his arm and shook him violently. You told me she would fold, Loretta screamed, her voice echoing off the marble floors. You said she was weak. Now I have a restraining order? Me? The owner of this family? Bryce tried to pull away. Mom, stop. People are watching. Let them watch, Loretta yelled, her face twisted into a mask of ugly, raw fury. They need to know. I am the one who put in the time. That farm is mine. That money is mine. She is stealing my life. She pointed a shaking finger at me across the lobby. You think a piece of paper stops me? She shrieked. I am the executor. I hold the cards. You will never see a dime. Everyone will see. I am the master of that house. My father stood there, shrinking into his coat, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him whole. He did not look at me. He just looked at the elevator buttons, pressing the down arrow over and over again as if it were an escape hatch. A security guard started walking toward them. Ma'am, keep it down. Loretta gathered herself, fixing her fur stole with a jerky, aggressive motion, and shoved Bryce into the opening elevator doors. As the doors closed, cutting off her screaming, I felt a strange sensation. It was not fear, it was pity. She was unraveling. She was a star collapsing in on herself, and she did not even realize she was burning out. She is going to violate the order, Jonah said quietly beside me. Give it a week. She will try, I said, clutching the copy of the protection order in my hand, but I am ready. I walked to my car, the paper feeling hot against my palm. It was just a piece of paper. Yes, but it was a boundary, a legal, enforceable boundary. For 4 years, I had lived without walls. Now, I had built a fortress. Later that afternoon, I was at my new apartment, unpacking the last box of books, when Jonah called. Check your email, he said. I just forwarded you something Loretta sent to my office. I have already filed it with the court as evidence of her state of mind, but you should see it. I opened my laptop. The email from Loretta was a single, rambling block of text, typed in all caps, sent at 3 a.m. the night before. Subject: Fraud and Lies. Miar, Halperin, you have poisoned my father-in-law against me. I know you and Marissa conspired to falsify his medical records. He was senile. He did not know what he was signing. If you do not release the full assets to me immediately, I will sue your firm for malpractice. I will sue Marissa for elder abuse. I have witnesses who will say she drugged him. Do not test me. I am the only one who cared about him. The money is mine by right of sacrifice. I read it twice. It was deranged. It was the manifesto of a person who had lost touch with reality because reality refused to bend to her will. She is digging her own grave, Jonah said on the phone. Every time she hits send, she proves our case that she feels entitled to the assets regardless of the decedent's wishes. Does she know about the trust yet? I asked. No, Jonah said. I am saving that for the reading. She thinks she is fighting a will. She does not know the battlefield has already moved. That evening, my phone rang again. It was a number I did not recognize, but I had a feeling. I answered, "Hello? Marissa?" It was Bryce. His voice sounded slurred, like he had been drinking. "You are not supposed to call me." "Bryce," I said, "that is a violation of the order. Third-party contact." "I am not calling for Mom," he said quickly. "I am calling—" "Look, are you sure you want to do this?" "Do what?" "Burn it all down," he said. She is losing it. Risa. She is talking about taking out a second mortgage on the townhouse to pay for a litigation lawyer. She is going to bankrupt herself fighting you. If you just take the $50,000 she offered, maybe we can stop this." I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot lights. "Bryce," I said, "there is no $50,000. She does not have it, and even if she did, it is not hers to give." "She says she is going to win," Bryce insisted, but he sounded like a scared child. "She says the will is ironclad." "The will is not the point anymore," I said. "The point is the truth. Grandpa saw you, Bryce. He saw the transfers for the student loans you had already paid off. He saw it all." There was silence on the other end of the line. Heavy, guilty silence. "You knew?" he whispered. "We knew," I corrected. "We knew for 6 months." "Jesus," Bryce breathed. "You have a choice," I said, my voice hard. "You can stand next to her when the ship goes down, and you can drown in her debt and her lies, or you can step away. But do not call me asking me to save her. She made her bed." I cannot leave her," Bryce said weakly. "She controls my credit cards." "That is your answer then," I said. "Goodbye, Bryce." I hung up. The notification for the will reading came the next morning. It had been pushed back to Friday to allow for the dust from the court hearing to settle. The delay only wound the spring tighter. Loretta spent the next few days telling anyone who would listen, the grocer, the postman, the hairstylist, that Friday was her vindication day. She told them she was going to expose the snake and reclaim her rightful property. She truly believed that the will Grandpa had signed years ago, the one leaving everything to her management, was the final word. She did not know that the chessboard she was screaming at had been swept clean months ago. She was moving pawns that did not exist, planning attacks against a king that had already castled. I sat in my apartment, the red file folder on my lap, and waited. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was just ready for the end. The trap was set. All Loretta had to do was walk into the room and open her mouth. The conference room at the law offices of Jonah Halpern was airless, filled with the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. It was 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. The sky outside was a flat, slate gray, but inside, the fluorescent lights hummed with clinical brightness. Loretta sat at the long mahogany table, wearing a black dress that I knew cost more than my first car. Her eyes were rimmed with red, the makeup heavy and caked in the creases, betraying nights of sleepless plotting. She held a tissue in one hand and her phone in the other, tapping the screen periodically as if summoning reinforcements. My father, Dennis, sat 2 chairs down from her, hunched over like a man trying to make himself disappear. Bryce was next to him, looking pale and sweating slightly, his eyes darting between his mother and the door. I sat on the opposite side of the table. My back was straight. My hands rested on the red file folder labeled Everett, important. I did not look at Loretta. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table, the one Jonah Halpern was about to fill. Jonah entered the room carrying a leather portfolio and a laptop. He did not smile. He did not offer coffee. He sat down, opened the laptop, and connected it to the large monitor on the wall. "Good morning," Jonah said. His voice was a gavel striking wood. "We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of Everett Kane, as well as the disclosure of the Kane Legacy Trust." Loretta cleared her throat. "We are expecting the standard distribution," she said, her voice tight. "My husband and I are the primary caregivers. We assume the older draft from 2015 is the governing document." "That document was revoked," Jonah said without looking up. "The governing will is the one signed and notarized 6 months ago. It was witnessed by Dr. Aris, Mr. Kane's neurologist, and my senior paralegal. The signing was also video recorded to prevent exactly the kind of speculation you are currently implying." Loretta stiffened. "Video?" "Mr. Kane anticipated challenges." Jonah said, "Before we proceed to the legal text, he left a personal message. He instructed me to play it for you as the opening statement." Jonah clicked a file on the screen. The room went dark as the monitor flickered to life. There, sitting in this very office, wearing his favorite flannel shirt, was Grandpa Everett. He looked healthier than he had in his final weeks. His eyes were sharp, blue, and piercing. I felt a sob catch in my throat. "Hello," Video Everett said. "If you are watching this, it means I am gone, and it also means I do not want anyone twisting my words now that I cannot speak for myself." On the screen, Grandpa leaned forward. He looked directly into the camera lens. "Loretta," he said. "In the conference room," Loretta gasped. "I know," Grandpa said. "I know about the credit cards. I know about the furniture you bought and called medical equipment. I know about the transfers to Bryce for loans he had already paid off. I let it happen because I was old, and I was tired, and I just wanted peace in my own house. But I did not want to reward greed." Loretta's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like she had been slapped. "Bryce," Grandpa continued, "you are a young man with a strong back. Stop waiting for me to die so you can be rich. Go earn it. I am not leaving you a safety net because I love you too much to let you stay lazy." The camera panned slightly. "Dennis," Grandpa said, his voice softening but heavy with disappointment. "You are my son. I love you. But you let fear run your house. You let your wife hurt your daughter because it was easier than fighting her. I forgive you, but I cannot trust you with my legacy." Then, Grandpa smiled. It was the smile he used to give me when I brought him ice cream in secret. "Marisa," he said, "my queen on the chessboard, you were the only one who came to me with empty hands and a full heart. You protected me when you thought no one was looking. You took the blows for me. Now, it is my turn to protect you." The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Jonah cleared his throat and opened a document. Now for the execution of the estate. First, Jonah read, all outstanding debts incurred by Loretta Caldwell or Dennis Caldwell against the credit of Everett Kane, including the home equity line of credit taken out on the farmhouse and the credit card balances, are to be settled immediately. He looked over his glasses at Loretta. Mr. Kane structured this specifically. These debts are not forgiven. They are deducted from the spousal portion of the estate, based on my accounting. Loretta, the debts you accumulated in his name total nearly $200,000. Loretta turned white. That is impossible. It is documented, Jonah said. This means your cash inheritance is effectively zero. You spent it while he was alive. This is fraud, Loretta shrieked. Standing up, I am the widow. I have rights. Sit down, Mrs. Caldwell, Jonah said. I am not finished. The entirety of Mr. Kane's liquid assets, Jonah continued, raising his voice slightly, totaling $1,140,000, has been moved into the Kane Legacy Trust. $1 million, Bryce whispered, his eyes wide. This trust is irrevocable, Jonah said. The sole beneficiary of the trust is Marissa Caldwell. I closed my eyes. I felt the table vibrating under my hands. $1 million. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was the end of the student loans. It was the end of the double shifts. However, Jonah added, looking at me, there are conditions. Marissa, your grandfather stipulated that the funds must be used to maintain the property and to establish a retreat. He wanted the farmhouse to be a place where burnt-out nurses and doctors could come for free. Short-term respite. He called it the caregiver's rest. I will do it, I whispered. I would have done it for free. As for the land itself, Jonah turned the page. Ownership of the acreage is transferred to the Colorado Land Conservancy to be protected from development in perpetuity. Bryce made a noise like a wounded animal. His luxury condo development dreams had just evaporated. But, Jonah said, the main house and the surrounding garden are subject to a life estate. Marissa Caldwell has the exclusive right to inhabit, manage, and modify the home for the duration of her natural life. She cannot be evicted. She cannot be forced to sell. Loretta was shaking. She was vibrating with a rage so pure it felt like heat radiating across the table. You? She pointed a shaking finger at Jonah. You manipulated him. You tricked a senile old man. I will have your license. I will sue this estate until there is nothing left but dust. That farm is mine. I anticipated you might feel that way, Jonah said calmly. He reached into his portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a handwritten note. This is a codicil, Jonah explained. A handwritten addendum, signed by Everett Kane. It states that if any beneficiary challenges the validity of this will or trust in a court of law, they immediately forfeit any and all residual allowances. Jonah paused. Loretta, there is a small stipend of $5,000 set aside for you to help with moving costs. If you file a lawsuit, you lose that $5,000. You lose everything. You will walk away with absolutely zero. Moving costs? Loretta whispered. The farm is Marissa's home now, Jonah said. You have 30 days to vacate. It was the final blow, the checkmate. Loretta looked at the paper. She looked at me. For the first time in her life, she was not looking at a victim. She was looking at the owner of the house she lived in. She turned to Bryce. Do something, she screamed. Call a lawyer. Bryce looked at his mother. He looked at the debts Jonah had listed. Debts that were technically in her name now. He looked at the $1 million that was sitting in a trust with my name on it. Mom, Bryce said, his voice cracking. It is over. What did you say? Loretta hissed. I said it is over. Bryce stood up. He looked tired. He looked defeated. I saw the transfers. Mom, he knew. He knew everything. I am not going to court with you. I am not going to lose what little credibility I have left. He looked at me. Congrats, Marissa. You played the long game. I didn't play a game. Bryce, I said quietly, I just loved him. Bryce walked out of the room. The door clicked shut. Dennis sat there, his hands covering his face. Loretta stared at the empty doorway. her chest heaving. Then, slowly, my father lowered his hands. He looked at me. His eyes were red. "Marisa," he said softly, "I am. I did not know." "You knew?" "Dad," I said, "you just didn't want to see?" "I am sorry," he whispered. "It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to erase the years of neglect, the years of letting her treat me like a servant." But it was the first time he had said it without adding a but or an excuse for her. "I know." I said, "Take care of yourself, Dad." I stood up. I picked up my red file folder. It felt light now. The weight was gone. Loretta did not move. She sat there, staring at the blank screen where Grandpa's face had been. She was a queen without a kingdom, a general without an army, sitting in the ruins of her own greed. I walked out of the office and into the lobby. The air conditioning felt cool on my face. I walked out of the building and onto the sidewalk. The gray sky had broken, and a shaft of sunlight was piercing through the clouds. I took a deep breath. It tasted like ozone and exhaust and freedom. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity, but for the first time in my life, it was activity that fed me rather than drained me. I used the initial distribution from the trust to hire a crew to clean the farmhouse. We stripped the beige wallpaper Loretta had loved and painted the walls a warm, soft cream. We tore up the carpets to reveal the original hardwood floors Grandpa had laid himself. I turned the upstairs bedrooms into guest suites. I bought high thread count sheets, blackout curtains, and white noise machines. I wanted it to be a sanctuary. I named it Everett Rest Lodge. Loretta moved out 2 weeks after the reading. She tried to take the furniture, but Jonah sent a sheriff's deputy to supervise the move, armed with an inventory list Grandpa had made. She left with her clothes, her jewelry, and her bitterness. She moved into a small apartment downtown. I heard she was working as a receptionist at a dental office. It seemed fitting. One evening in July, 6 months after the funeral, I sat on the front porch of the farmhouse. The sun was setting, painting the Rockies in shades of purple and gold. The air smelled of pine and the barbecue I had started in the backyard. A car pulled up the long gravel driveway, then another. It was Talia, my friend from the ICU, and 3 other nurses from the night shift. They looked exhausted, their eyes dark with fatigue, their shoulders slumped. They got out of their cars, looking at the mountains, looking at the house. "Oh my God. Marisa," Talia said, walking up the steps. "Is this real?" "It is real," I said, standing up to hug her. "Leave your bags. Go sit by the fire. Dinner is in an hour." I watched them walk into the house, watched the tension leave their bodies as they stepped into the sanctuary Grandpa had built for them. I sat back down on the porch swing. I opened my laptop. I had started writing a journal, a record of everything that had happened, so I would never forget the price of this piece. I typed the final lines. Stepmother beat me over a $1 million inheritance. Grandpa changed his will to save me, but the rest, the part where I learned to say no, the part where I learned to stand up, I had to do that myself. From the kitchen, I heard laughter. It was loud and free. It wasn't the sound of people demanding service. It was the sound of healing. I closed the laptop. I looked up at the first star appearing in the twilight sky. "Checkmate, Grandpa," I whispered. "Checkmate." Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to know which part of the world my listeners are from. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.